Chapter 61, The First Prince Has Arrived. I am Ling Han. Ling Han stood up, offered a faint smile, and then sat back down. Was that all? Ling clan, which great clan was that? Everyone was very curious. There was no Ling clan in the 8 great clans of the imperial city. Could it be that the Ling clan was a great clan from some other city? That was possible, because there were 36 great cities in Rain Country, and there was a number of great clans in each city. That brought the total of great clans in the whole country to over 100. Who could say with certainty that they knew all of them? However, the most surprised was definitely Qi Yongyi. He was the only one who knew Lu Yutong's real identity. To be able to have a princess of the Lu clan wait upon him, what kind of colossal existence could this Ling clan be? Whatever it was, he still had to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Qi Yongyi was an expert at manipulating the mood, and very quickly, everyone's attention was again focused on him. There was a round of laughter in the main hall, as everyone felt that this prince really had a unique charm, causing many of them to be of a mind to swear loyalty under his banner. Announcing the arrival of the first prince. It was at this very moment that a loud shout was heard from outside. The first prince has arrived. Everyone was extremely shocked. Who didn't know that the first prince and the fourth prince were currently embroiled in a fierce competition for the king's position? Why had he suddenly come here? Fourth brother. Very soon, the first prince appeared at the doorway of the main hall. He was a very handsome man in his 30s. He had a tall and sturdy figure with an exceptional bearing. He was all smiles as he took great strides towards Qi Yongyi, looking nothing like a rival or enemy of the latter. Qi Yongyi stood and walked forwards to greet the first prince. He was also all smiles as he said, "Eldest brother, what are you doing here?" When the two of them neared each other, they both tacitly stopped their advance. They both watched each other with smiles, yet neither had any intention of extending their arms to embrace the other in greeting. My fourth brother is hosting a banquet. I, as the eldest brother, must of course come to show my support, the first prince said, smiling. Qi Yongyi could not help but frown slightly at this. The reason he was hosting this banquet was to gain the will of the people to gather support for when he ascends to the position of the king in the future. There was no way that the first prince did not know this. Then the reason he was here was obvious. He was here to ruin things for him. Hee, then I'll thank you, eldest brother. He said in a very false manner, though his face still wore a dazzling smile. The first prince paused, and said, I've also brought a noble guest with me. Oh, and who might that be? Qi Yongyi asked. He knew that the first prince would not have come just to show his face. The latter would definitely have a more substantial move planned. Brother Gua, please, the first prince called in the direction of the doorway. Everyone turned to take a look at the first prince's noble guest, and saw a young man in gray walk in. He was of medium height and his features were very ordinary, but when they saw the badge that hung on his chest, there was a slight change in all of their expressions. Yellow grade medium level alchemist. Alchemists were an existence that would be welcomed anywhere, as well as an existence that no self-respecting party could lack. If a party possessed the aid and support of an alchemist, then to individual cultivators, or even smaller powers, this party would be very attractive as an ally. Martial artists were too dependent on alchemical medicines. Fourth brother, let me introduce to you. This here is Gua Ding Quan, Brother Gua, and he's a yellow grade medium level alchemist. And Brother Gua's master is even more impressive. He is the one and only Grandmaster Duanmu, who has been acclaimed as one who excels in both sword skill and alchemy. The first prince wore a dazzling smile, and was feeling very cheerful. On the other hand, Qi Yongyi felt a bitter taste on his tongue. He knew that the first prince was here to ruin things, and unfortunately, it seemed like he was going to succeed. The fact that Gua Ding Quan was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist was not the main point. The crux of the matter was that his master, Duanmu Chang Feng, was an actual black-grade low-level alchemist. Although currently, the first prince was only close with Gua Ding Quan, but a disciple could also in a sense represent the master's partiality. The first prince was issuing a signal to everyone, he had a very good relationship with Duanmu Changfeng and has obtained the latter's support. This definitely added a very heavy bargaining chip to his pile, while also being a very heavy blow to Qi Yongyi. The weight of an alchemist was too much. "Brother Gua," Qi Yongyi said in greeting, still maintaining a wide smile. He could not chase the first prince and Gua Dingquan away, or rumors would definitely spread, saying that he was a petty character. As a person who was seated in the upper echelons of society, he definitely had to present himself as a generous man. If he couldn't do even this small thing, then what right did he have to inherit the position of the king? Gua Dingquan was very arrogant. Even towards the fourth prince's greeting, he only replied with a "Hn." He was really displaying an all-out arrogance and pride of an alchemist. This profession was really too scarce, so all alchemists were treated with utmost respect and as a result, completely spoilt. "Brother Gua, please sit." Qi Yongyi was secretly angered, but still displayed a very polite demeanor. Gua Dingquan's eyes swept over the scene, before walking forwards in a straight line. If he was sitting, then he was naturally going to sit in the first row. Otherwise, how could he preserve his pride? Because all the tables here were arranged 5 in one row, and there was not much of a gap in between tables, so on both sides, there was a very wide aisle, so Gua Dingquan could only choose to walk up the left aisle or the right aisle. The unfortunate thing was that he chose to walk straight up the left aisle, and arrived at Ling Han's table, but whether or not it was because he had spotted Lu Yutong, that was something that only he himself knew. "You can get lost now," he said coldly. How overbearing. The first thing he said upon opening his mouth was to tell someone else to get lost. Did he really think he was the emperor? However, he himself was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist, while his master was a black-grade alchemist, so he really did have the confidence to be so overbearing. Ling Han smiled. In the eyes of others, this meant that he was apparently going to give in to Gua Dingquan's overbearing demand, but Lu Yutong knew that it was the exact opposite. Ling Han was angry. Not only that, he was very angry. He said, "Why don't you try saying that again? Get lost. Get lost. Get lost." Gua Dingquan naturally did not feel scared of this subtle threat. He not only said it again, he even emphasized his demand 3 times. A coldness flashed through Ling Han's eyes. In an instant, his hand flashed out, taking hold of Gua Dingquan's neck. With a harsh tug and a pang, Gua Dingquan's face was instantly pressed firmly onto the table. The shock wave of his face meeting the table caused the wine jar to topple over, and immediately, wine splashed all over his face. Gua Dingquan was firmly pressed down onto the table, and he started struggling vigorously, intending to get out of Ling Han's hold. Yet it was all pointless effort. The main hall was dead silent. This guy was really too great, he even dared to hit an alchemist. Everyone sucked their breath in shock. He had balls, he was a real man. The first prince was initially startled, before suddenly erupting in fury. He never imagined that someone would actually dare to beat up Gua Dingquan. Initially, his aura had completely overwhelmed Qi Yongyi, but with this show of force, Gua Dingquan was not the only one who had lost his face. He was also embarrassed. He strode quickly towards Ling Han and his right hand flashed out, intending to grab onto Ling Han's neck, shouting, "I command you to release him." Shua, a strong wind blew past, and Lu Yutong had already acted, blocking the first prince's action. The first prince was stunned by her beauty at first, but immediately his gaze regained focus. Everything could be sacrificed for the king's position, and Gua Dingquan was a trump card that decided whether or not he could defeat the fourth prince, thus he could not allow any problems to emerge. "Step down," he shouted. He did not counterattack immediately because he did not want to harm such a beautiful maiden if he could avoid it. Lu Yutong only gave a wave of her hand, and said, "Get lost. Get lost." She actually told the first prince to get lost. She was indeed extremely daring. When Qi Yongyi saw this, he could not help smiling. He was the only one who knew that Lu Yutong was a noble daughter of the Lu clan. If the first prince offended her, that was definitely not anything good for him. But while this would be a bad thing for the first prince, for himself, this would be a good thing indeed. Chapter 62, Leaving in Anger. Get lost. With a casual wave of his hand, Guoding Quan was easily flung away by Ling Han, and with a peng, he crashed into the nearest wall. Bastard! Guoding Quan got back to his feet and shouted in a towering rage. He was really about to die from his utmost fury. As an alchemist, someone who was respected and revered by everyone, he had actually been pressed onto a table, wine had splattered all over his face, and he had even been flung away to crash into a wall. Thankfully, dinner had not been served yet. Otherwise, his face would have been even more colorful, decorated by a myriad of dishes. You want to try it again? Ling Han asked coldly. This was not the first alchemist he had thrashed, and definitely wouldn't be the last. I want you to die. Guoding Quan roared furiously. Teng, 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 with heavy steps, he charged over to Ling Han again. As an alchemist, he had never experienced such great shame. If he did not avenge himself, then he could not live with himself. Ling Han moved. Peng, Guoding Quan was once again held by his neck, and as expected, slammed onto the table face first. The difference was that Ling Han had used more strength this time, causing the table to be broken in half by the force. Ah dash! Veins were protruding all over Guoding Quan's face in his anger, and his eyes looked like they were about to spit out fire. However, he did not charge a second time, because he had finally sensed that the gap between Ling Han and himself was far too wide. Damn it, based on aura, Ling Han could only be about the same level as he himself was. At most, they were both in the fourth layer of element gathering tier, but why was he so strong? He turned his head to look at the first prince. The latter was stuck in a confrontation with Lu Yutong, so could not possibly assist him at this time. He raised his voice and said, "Whoever helps me thrash this brat, I will gift him with 10 embracing origin pills." What, embracing origin pill? For anyone below the 9th layer of element gathering tier, this is a valuable treasure. It can help one in the formation of the origin nucleus and increase the chances of success by about 30%. To give out 10 pills in one go, what opulence! Everyone was discussing this spiritedly, but there were not many who were really interested in taking up Guoding Quan's offer, because who amongst those invited was not a genius? For a genius, if they even had to depend on external support just to form their origin nucleus, what right did they have to the name of genius? When Guoding Quan saw this, he could not help grit his teeth and finally announced, "An earth and fire pill." Damn, an earth and fire pill. This time, everyone could no longer just stay in their seats calmly. Even Qi Yongyi and the first prince seemed tempted by this new offer. The earth and fire pill had similar effects as the purple origin pill. It was also used to help a martial artist break through to the gushing spring tier, but its effects were much weaker than the latter. At most, it could only raise the chance of success by 20%. But still, it was a very rare and extremely valuable spiritual medicine. Even for a genius like Qi Yongyi, he also had been stuck at the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier for over half a year. Normally, if one could manage to break through to gushing spring tier within 3 to 5 years' time, that was already a feat worthy of praise. Meanwhile, the first prince had already reached the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier 7 years ago, yet his cultivation level remained unchanged even until now, showing the extreme difficulty of breaking through to the gushing spring tier. An earth and fire pill could very possibly save quite a few years' time of cultivation for even a genius, so it was extremely valuable. However, although the ingredients required for the concoction of an earth and fire pill were not as costly as the ingredients for a purple origin pill, they were still extremely rare, and while there were many willing to buy, none were willing to sell. Otherwise, with the financial resources available to the royal house of the De Yuan king, they would have been able to afford a few of them. As a result, everyone immediately turned to stare feverishly at Ling Han, as if he himself was an earth and fire pill. What impudence, where do you people think this place is? Qi Yongyi immediately spoke coldly. He was a man that knew what his role was, so he naturally suppressed the covetousness he felt in his heart. Guo Dingquan was working for the first prince, so he of course would not bother to assist the former. Moreover, Ling Han had an unknown relationship with Lu Yutong, and with this, his position was extremely clear. He'd help Ling Han. With this exclamation from the fourth prince, everyone immediately regained their composure. This was the residence of the fourth prince, and if they dared to come to arms here, then in a sense, it was no different than rebellion. Guo Dingquan breathed heavily and glared at Qi Yongyi fiercely before suddenly turning around and leaving. There was no way that he could swallow this great offense. He was going to fetch his master. No one could insult an alchemist in this manner. Brother Guo. Brother Guo. The first prince hurriedly called as he chased after Guo Dingquan's heels. As sudden as the two's arrival was, they left just as suddenly. There was a temporary calm in the main hall. Some of the guests felt sorry for missing out on an opportunity to obtain the earth and fire pill, while some other guests were curious about the future development of this matter. Come, replace the table. Qi Yongyi began to manipulate the atmosphere and once again displayed his personal charm, causing the atmosphere of the banquet to regain its liveliness. All of them were extremely interested in Ling Han. It was not difficult to restrain Guo Dingquan. In fact, 80% of the people present here would be able to do so easily, but to dare to do so, perhaps only Ling Han possessed such courage. Brother Ling, may I know where do you originate from? Someone finally asked. Grey Cloud Town. Ling Han had no intention of concealing it. After all, since he was intending to participate in the De Yuan tournament, he could not falsify his identity. Grey Cloud Town? All of them gave a start at this. Wasn't that a small place under the jurisdiction of the De Yuan city? Then where did Ling Han get his confidence from? He was not the only one who had made a great display of power, for even the girl beside him appeared to be very proud. She had not even taken the first prince seriously. Qi Yongyi was even more surprised. Ling Han came from Grey Cloud Town? Then how had he developed a relationship with Lu Yutong? Even though he himself was of nobility, when compared to Lu Yutong, there was still a bit of a gap between them. After all, they could only be considered as one of the branch families of the imperial family, and after so many generations, their relation with the imperial family was not really very close. Unless he could ascend to the position of the De Yuan king, even he would not be qualified to marry Lu Yutong. Yet Ling Han could have Lu Yutong follow closely by his side. A brat from a tiny little Grey Cloud Town, what right did he have to do such a thing? As the various dishes were served, everyone too felt slightly famished and so began eating. Martial artists expended a lot of energy, and so would become hungry more easily than normal people. Ha ha ha, apologies, apologies. Fourth prince, I've arrived late. A long bout of laughter was heard and a tall, young man walked in. He appeared to be about 20 years old, and had an astonishing aura to him. The third son of the Jin clan, Jin Wuji. Jin Wuxiang followed right behind, imitating the former's steps slavishly. He seemed a bit like a mouse that had seen a cat, and there was absolutely no sign of his prior arrogance. Brother Jin, why are you so late? Qi Yongyi asked, smiling as he stood. I had some trifling matters to deal with. Jin Wuji said, as he continued to walk forwards. Elder brother, that's him. That's him. When they arrived at the first row, Jin Wuxiang immediately called out, as he pointed at Ling Han. Jin Wuji's eyes swept over the first row, and could not hold back an expression of shock from appearing on his face, as he said, Younger sister disciple Lu, what are you doing here? He was also a disciple of Huyang Academy, so he naturally recognized the princess, Lu Yutong. Lu Yutong only nodded back calmly and did not make any further response. Jin Wuji knew her personality, so he did not take her cool response to heart. His gaze turned towards Ling Han, and coldness flashed through his eyes immediately. Initially, he had only been a little late, but when he encountered his younger brother at the entrance and found out what the latter had experienced, he immediately ordered someone to investigate Ling Han. This was not difficult. Since he had already registered, there would definitely be a profile of him in the records. A mere young master from a tiny clan of Grey Cloud Town, and he actually dared to oppose the Jin clan? He definitely did not think that Lu Yutong would actually deign to like Ling Han. Even if she did, the Lu clan would definitely not agree to such a match. This would practically be a great dishonor to the clan. As a result, he did not fear that Lu Yutong would defend Ling Han. Moreover, his power was above Lu Yutong. "Brat, get lost from my seat," he said coldly. Chapter 63, Damn, hit the wrong person. Ling Han could not withhold a smile from turning up at the corners of his lips, and said, "Are you sure you want the seat?" "Hang, this was originally my seat," Jin Wuji said coldly. "Very well, since you want it, then I'll just let you have it." Ling Han stood up very candidly. "Pooh!" Quite a few people exclaimed in surprise. Because, there really was too big a difference between what Ling Han was doing now and what he had done just now. Previously, Ling Han had even dared to thrash the disciple of someone who excelled in sword arts and alchemy openly in front of the first prince. Yet, now he was actually scared off. It was inconceivable, it was really inconceivable. They were not the only ones who thought it was inconceivable. Lu Yutong was in complete bewilderment. Ling Han had left a very distinct impression on her. Though he may appear to be utterly calm, he was prouder than anyone else. How was it possible that he would give in to Jin Wuji's demand? If they really had to battle, she was adequate enough to face Jin Wuji. And even if the Jin clan stepped out and interfered, didn't he still have the colossal existence of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion behind him? In the whole of Rain Country, what party would dare to offend Heaven's Medicine Pavilion? None, there were definitely none. Because, this huge power did not only exist in Rain Country, but also possessed branches in the 9 countries in the desolate north, so whether it was in terms of power or wealth, it had a terrifying amount of both. Just think, when martial artists cultivate, they would definitely need the support of alchemical pills, and Heaven's Medicine Pavilion was a place where alchemical pills could be sold, so how could there be a lack of elite martial artists willing to act on their behalf? From the reverence and respect Zhu He Xian felt towards Ling Han, he had practically recognized the latter as his teacher. If the Jin clan dared to harm Ling Han, he would definitely unleash the power of the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion branch of Rain Country and obliterate the Jin clan. Since the facts were as so, then why would he need to fear? Ling Han stretched out an arm and drew Lu Yutong to himself. An enchanting blush instantly appeared on the young girl's beautiful face, and there was absolutely no hint of the icy beauty from before. Damn! When they saw this dazzling, extraordinarily beautiful maiden, everyone was filled with such irrepressible jealousy that their eyes turned red, wanting nothing more than to chop off the arm Ling Han was holding Lu Yutong with. Lu Yutong's mind had completely blanked. She only felt as if she was walking on clouds, and when she followed Ling Han to sit in one of the tables at the row further behind, even though Ling Han had long withdrawn his arm, she still had not regained her senses. Her heart was still rapidly beating. "Just wait and we'll see a good show," Ling Han said softly by her ear. Lu Yutong froze at this, and said, "What good show?" Ling Han pouted a bit, and said, "Don't forget that Guo something from just now had gone to get reinforcements." "You're planning to trick Jin Wuji?" Lu Yutong finally understood. Ling Han smiled and said, "I've already asked him if he really wanted that seat, and he himself agreed to it, so what does that have to do with me?" Lu Yutong could not help pursing her lips in a delicate smile, but immediately frowned, and said, "Duanmu Chang Feng couldn't be that hot-headed, right? I bet he has already restrained a whole stomach's worth of anger from yesterday, and when that Guo whatever returned, he'd definitely exaggerate the story, thus the old man's wrath would definitely be extraordinarily large. Moreover, when I was thrashing that Guo whatever, I immediately acted without saying a single word." Ling Han laughed and said, "So, there is a high possibility that the old guy would do something like that. When that Duanmu Chang Feng realizes that he has punished the wrong person, he would definitely focus on you." Lu Yutong's delicate brow wrinkled in a frown. "I think that, by that time, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan will have already arrived. However, even if they have not, I have my own ways of dealing with that old man. Ling Han revealed a confident smile, for Zhu Hexian had told about Duanmu Changfeng to him. The old man was praised as one who excelled in sword arts and alchemy, and the sword technique that he practiced was Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, a black-grade low-level martial arts technique. However, the old man only managed to learn 7 moves, while the complete Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts had a total of 9 moves. The book of sword arts techniques that the old guy managed to get his hands on should be a partially ruined relic, which was why he had not managed to learn the last 2 moves. Coincidentally, Ling Han possessed the complete Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, so no matter from which angle one looked, he had the upper hand in the upcoming confrontation. Lu Yutong has definitely been badly influenced by Ling Han, and she could not withhold an expectant look from appearing on her face. Because of Ling Han's lack of moral backbone, all of the guests felt shame for sharing his company, thus no one else spoke to him. Meanwhile, Jin Wuxiang turned his head repeatedly, displaying a challenging expression to Ling Han. From his expression, he had clearly held disdain for Ling Han as well. He had originally thought that Ling Han would be stubborn, and in that way, his elder brother would definitely have an excuse to heavily injure Ling Han. He had never thought that the guy was the type to bully the weak while fearing the strong. But, do you think that you'll be able to escape just like this? Jin Wuxiang humphed coldly in his heart. Once the banquet ended and they had left the residence of the 4th prince, Jin Wuji would definitely act and ruthlessly teach Ling Han a lesson. They still had to give face to the 4th prince. Ling Han's capitulation was something that even Qi Yongyi had not thought would happen, so he too grew disdainful of Ling Han. As a result, he did not bother to waste any more time on Ling Han, and went on with his original plans, starting to persuade the other guests in hope that everyone invited would agree to support him. "Master, that's him." Not long after, a voice filled with fury was heard. Guoding Quan had once again appeared at the entry to the main hall, and he was pointing inside. Everyone turned around at this, but they only felt their eyes blurring as a figure flew past with a terrifying speed. It was an old man dressed in a grey robe, with a sword on his back. His figure flashed by and soon appeared next to Jin Wuji. He then stretched out a hand, took hold of Jin Wuji's neck and fiercely pressed it down. Pung! The power behind this move was extremely large, and it had broken the table into 2 halves. By now, the dishes and wine had all been served, so instantly, the wine and gravy from the dishes had all splattered onto Jin Wuji's face. This was an uninvited calamity, definitely an uninvited calamity. How could Jin Wuji have imagined that someone would actually dare attack him? Moreover, his attacker was so overwhelmingly powerful that he didn't even have the ability to defend himself, and in such a confusion, suffered this kind of calamity. Ha 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 ha, you were so arrogant, why don't you try being arrogant again? Guoding Quan had raced over, and aimed a few kicks on Jin Wuji's behind. His whole face was twisted in fury, as if he wanted nothing more than to commit murder. Jin Wuxiang was initially startled, before shouting, "Why are you beating him up?" He felt very wronged. Because, all this while, the Jin brothers were always the ones who bullied others, yet today, his elder brother had actually been thrashed by 2 people they had never even met before. He didn't even manage to react in time due to shock. Guoding Quan took one glance at him, and only felt that Jin Wuxiang was a completely unfamiliar face. It was not the icy beauty from before. Still, he did not take this disparity to heart, and only continued to kick Jin Wuji furiously. The people involved in the confrontation each had their own side. One side had misunderstood while the other side was stuck in a complete daze, but others immediately came to a realization. Guoding Quan had brought his master who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy, Duanmu Changfeng, yet had hit the wrong target. Poor Jin Wuji, he was painfully thrashed for no reason. At this moment, he had to be feeling extremely gloomy. No wonder Ling Han had yielded the seat to Jin Wuji just now. Apparently, he had already planned to lay a trap for him. Damn, this guy was really too devious. When they saw that Jin Wuji was still being thrashed while Jin Wuxiang seemed to be at a complete loss, quite a few people could not hold themselves back from laughing out loud. Moreover, the laughter was getting louder and louder, and finally spread to all the others as everyone held their stomachs and laughed raucously. Guo Dingquan too finally realized that something was wrong. He turned Jin Wuji to face him, and when he saw the unfamiliar face that was completely splattered with wine and gravy, he could not help giving a start and said, "Who are you?" "Pooh." Jin Wuji instantly spat out a mouthful of blood in anger. "You don't even ***king know who I am, then why did you beat me up? And you had thrashed me so ferociously, even? Who had he actually offended? No matter who you people are, I will definitely have you pay the price." He roared in fury. Chapter 64, Effortlessly Controlling the Situation. "This is not the person who had thrashed you?" Duanmu Changfeng was also startled, as well as slightly displeased. "Since this wasn't the guy, then why the heck did you point at this guy the moment you came in?" "No." Guo Dingquan was also very depressed. "Since you're not Ling Han, then what the heck were you doing sitting here?" He looked at Jin Wuji and asked, "Where is the person who had been sitting here before?" Jin Wuji was not a fool, so he immediately realized. He had fallen into Ling Han's trap. This brat had offended these two people, and coincidentally, he had demanded for the brat to relinquish his seat to him. As a result, the brat took advantage of the situation to lay a trap for him, causing him to suffer horribly. That damned little beast. "Ling Han!" He roared loudly, "Get out here, I'm going to kill you." Ling Han. When Duanmu Changfeng heard this name, killing intent instantly appeared in his heart. This was the name of the junior who had caused him to sustain extraordinary loss of face. An old fox like him of course immediately realized that both he and Jin Wuji had been played by Ling Han. Shua, everyone's eyes turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han was sitting upright, and even with so many people focused on him, he did not feel the slightest bit nervous. He took a sip of wine, and could not help recollecting that in his last life, all the wines he had drunk were the best quality wine. It was definitely not something this so-called excellent wine could be compared to. For the moment, Jin Wuji had no intention of getting his revenge on Guo Dingquan. Moreover, the latter had Duanmu Changfeng with him, and this was a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear whose prowess was stronger than his own by who knows how many times. He looked at Ling Han, his hands tightly gripped into fists. Gravy and blood had spilled from his wounds due to being smashed into the table covered his face. His appearance was ferocious and twisted, it could practically scare kids to tears. "Ah, you've played us," Jin Wuxiang called out, pointing at Ling Han. He had finally realized the truth. "Ha ha ha ha." Quite a few people could not hold themselves back from laughing aloud. So the saying held true: though a dragon has 9 sons, each of them are different. This Jin Wuxiang was a complete idiot. It didn't even seem that he and Jin Wuji could have come from the same father and mother. "You are indeed extremely daring," Duanmu Changfeng said darkly. He actually dared to manipulate even himself. Looks like this little junior was really tired of living. Seeing Duanmu Changfeng speak, Jin Wuji immediately fell silent. Obviously, the former also had some kind of conflict with Ling Han, and this man was in gushing spring tear, and his status was far higher than his own as well. Even if he intended to get his own revenge, he would have to wait for his turn. Duanmu Changfeng took great strides towards Ling Han, his eyes cold. He had already decided, even if Zhu He Xian and Zhang Wei Shan both came, he would still not spare this insolent junior. Guo Dingquan followed closely, a cold smile upon his lips. This brat dared to trick even his master. He was really dead this time. Duanmu Changfeng did not walk very fast, but every step he took caused the whole main hall to shake slightly, showing the towering rage that this man, one who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy, was currently feeling. Even Qi Yongyi, as the 4th prince, dared not speak up in defense of Ling Han at this moment. What was Ling Han going to do now? His move just now was indeed very beautiful, managing to trap and trick 2 of his enemies simultaneously. However, no matter if it was Duanmu Changfeng or the Jin clan, neither was a party that could be offended without harsh consequences. Everyone felt extremely curious about his next move. Ling Han did not look at all like that kind of fool. Lu Yutong immediately stood, and assumed a defensive stance in front of Ling Han. However, she was immediately pushed lightly aside by Ling Han. Ling Han only said calmly, "The four winds rise, clouds in the heavens thrown into disorder, the tiger and crane both appear, creating invincibility." Ji. Duanmu Changfeng's advancing steps paused, and he looked as if he had been struck by a lightning bolt, wearing an expression like he had just seen a ghost. But after a short moment, he immediately looked very excited, so much in fact that even his body began shaking. This was the verbal chant for the 8th move of the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts. The Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts was a black-grade medium-level martial arts technique. He had learned it from a secret scroll he had obtained from an ancient site. Unfortunately, due to the long passage of time, the parts showing the last 2 moves had completely deteriorated. There was only a verbal chant as well as an illustration for the 8th move, but there wasn't even a name for the 9th move left behind. The reason why he could afford to not take Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan seriously was because he possessed the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts. The 3 of them were all in the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring tier, but because of the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, even if Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan joined forces, they would still be no match for him. But it was precisely because this sword arts technique was so powerful that he desired to obtain the last 2 moves even in his dreams. Thus, when Ling Han recited the verbal chant from Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, how could he not be excited? You know it?" Duanmu Changfeng said, his voice stuttering. "Naturally." Ling Han nodded. "Will you teach me?" The old guy's face was filled with expectation. Ling Han smiled, and said, "That will depend on your performance." Duanmu Changfeng did not even spend any time to consider, and said, "Whatever request you have, just say it. Whether it is alchemical pills, or resources for cultivation, I can give them to you." See. Around them, everyone was at an absolute loss. Just now, Duanmu Changfeng seemed like he would stop at nothing in his desire to kill Ling Han. So how come his attitude changed so drastically? Was this some kind of magic trick? Master Guoding Quan had become anxious. What kind of demonic magic had this brat used? Ling Han pointed at Jin Wuji and his brother, and turned to point at Guoding Quan as well, and said, "These 3 guys, they are unpleasant to my eyes." Very well. A very experienced man like Duanmu Changfeng of course instantly understood Ling Han's meaning. He did not say another word before he lifted up Guoding Quan in 1 move and in a flash arrived in front of the Jin brothers. His left hand gave a shove, and a very powerful, irresistible force caused the 2 Jin brothers to fall down onto the floor. Peng 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 peng, Duanmu Changfeng kicked and punched, ravaging the 3 as much as he liked. Everyone else was completely dumbfounded. Ling Han had just said a few words that sounded like some kind of verbal chant, and Duanmu Changfeng actually became Ling Han's underling, obeying his commands. Admiration for Ling Han had risen in all of them. Whether it was Guoding Quan, the Jin brothers, or even Duanmu Changfeng, they had all been played, being in the palm of his hand. The Jin brothers were completely depressed, the depression sinking into their very bones. What great enmity or conflict did they have with Duanmu Changfeng? Previously, they had been thrashed by this old man for no reason, but that could be explained by it all being a misunderstanding due to Ling Han tricking them both. But what about this time? But since a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring tier had made his move, what else could they do other than obediently suffer the thrashing without complaints? Qi Yongye's face was twitching all over. Since the moment he saw that Ling Han had Lu Yutong accompany him, he already knew that this guy was definitely not ordinary, but to be awesome to such an extent caused even him to experience a great shock. Duanmu Changfeng was not just a warrior of Gushing Spring tier, he was also a black-grade low-level alchemist, being slightly well-known in Rain Country. Even if a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier met him, the former would be extremely courteous and polite. But now, to put it in a coarse manner, what difference did he have with being Ling Han's underling, simply doing as the latter commanded? What happened to the dignity of an alchemist, or the moral integrity of a warrior of gushing spring tear? However, if he maintained a good relationship with Ling Han, did that mean he would be able to take Duanmu Changfeng under his own banner? The first prince was so excited just from being able to befriend Guoding Quan. If he managed to attract Duanmu Changfeng to his side, then his position would be incomparably steady, and no one would be able to stop him from inheriting the king's position. And thus, when Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan arrived at a later time, they saw such a scene. Duanmu Changfeng was thrashing his own disciple and the Jin brothers as if he had gone mad, while the person they were supposedly here to rescue, Ling Han, was leisurely sitting, drinking wine and eating. What kind of game were they playing here? Chapter 65, Summoned by the De Yuan King. Guoding Quan and the Jin brothers felt gloomy to the extreme. For Guoding Quan, master beating up his disciple was the same as a father beating his son, a law of nature, so how could he even think of avenging himself? If he did, that would fall into the crime of ingratitude and cheating his own master, and wherever he fled to, he'd be pointed out by every man. Meanwhile, the Jin brothers knew that the old man that had thrashed them was the one who excelled in sword arts and alchemy, a person who possessed extremely high status. Even when the De Yuan King met him, he'd still treat the latter with utmost courtesy and politeness, so even if the older generations of the Jin clan found out about this matter, they would still definitely not seek vengeance for them. Which means that they had suffered this thrashing for absolutely no reason. Ling Han. The three of them gritted their teeth in fury. The chief culprit behind all this was Ling Han, and he had become the object of their utmost hatred. Young friend Ling, are you all right? Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan had raced over, anxious expressions on their faces. I'm fine. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. Of course he's fine, everyone else thought. He played a trick on both the Jin brothers and Duanmu Changfeng, and now even Duanmu Changfeng was listening to his every command. How could he possibly not be fine? However, when they saw the two alchemists arrive and present an overwhelmingly polite demeanor towards Ling Han, they could not control their lips from twitching, and everyone was becoming even more curious about Ling Han's actual identity. Who was this guy? The heartbeat of the fourth prince had quickened as he decided to spare no effort to pull Ling Han into his own support camp. If he managed to obtain the support of 3 alchemists through Ling Han, then what else did he have to fear from a mere Lu clan? The position of the De Yuan King would definitely fall to him. Ling Han did not intend to stay any longer in this place, and so turned around to depart. Duanmu Changfeng, uncaring of his own face, followed behind him to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. He still had to ask Ling Han for the verbal chants and illustrations for the last 2 moves of the Sweeping Cloud sword arts. Regarding this matter, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan were both very shocked. They had never thought that Ling Han not only had a terrifying level of achievements in terms of alchemy, but possessed extraordinary understanding even in the field of martial arts, so much that he could even guide Duanmu Changfeng, who has been praised as one who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy. Ling Han did not go back on his word. Upon their return, he taught the missing 8th move of Sweeping Cloud sword arts to Duanmu Changfeng. As for the 9th move, he would of course not immediately teach him that last move to avoid Duanmu Changfeng abandoning his benefactor after reaching his goal. At the very least, he would wait until he himself had broken through to the gushing spring tier. By that time, there would be no harm to teach him the 9th move. Anyways, this was just a black-grade medium-level martial arts technique, and for Ling Han, it was completely unimportant. Duanmu Changfeng apparently understood this as well, as he excused himself shortly after obtaining the verbal chant and illustration for the 8th move. Whether he managed to get the 9th move or not would depend on his future performance. When he returned to his room, Ling Han very quickly fell asleep, and Ling Dongxing had completely no idea how big a commotion his son had created that night. None of those who had the qualifications to be invited to the 4th prince's banquet were mouthy idiots, so the news about Ling Han had only spread around in a very small circle. Early morning the next day, a servant from the royal house of the De Yuan King arrived at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, saying that the De Yuan King had invited Ling Han over for a meeting. The De Yuan King wanted to see him? Ling Han did not have Lu Yutong follow him. He alone went with that servant to the royal house of the De Yuan King. Very soon, when they arrived at the study, he saw this local overlord. The De Yuan King was already 60 years old, but because he had a high cultivation level, he did not look old at all. On the other hand, his figure was tall and sturdy, and his whole body exuded a very powerful aura, displaying the atmosphere of a ruler. The 6th layer of spiritual ocean tier. Ling Han only took one glance, and there was no way for this man to conceal his cultivation level in front of his eyes. On the path of martial arts, every 4th and 7th layer was a different threshold. This De Yuan King should have been stuck on this layer for a very long time. Greetings, De Yuan King. Ling Han raised his clasped hands as a salutation. Rise. The De Yuan King raised his hand, and said with a smile, youngsters nowadays are really impressive. Not only managing to reach the 4th layer of element gathering tier at such a young age, you even have 3 black-grade alchemists revolving around you. Even I have not had such an honor. The De Yuan King had obviously already found out about the previous night's event. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, I only have some slight academic attainments in alchemy, which allowed me to share a common language with Grandmaster Zhu and the others. The De Yuan King naturally would not believe Ling Han's words, yet he did not attempt to point it out bluntly. He only kept his extreme curiosity to himself, curiosity how such a genius had appeared within the area under his jurisdiction, and a genius that had 3 alchemists willingly revolving around him at that. Then what about that girl of the Lu clan? He asked with a smile. The issue about Lu Yutong couldn't be hidden from him either. Hee, if one is born handsome, he'd be popular everywhere, Ling Han said exaggeratedly. You, the De Yuan King pointed a bit at Ling Han, as if reprimanding him for being too slick in his speech. He changed the topic swiftly and asked, whom do you think out of my 2 sons is more suitable to inherit my position? Was it appropriate to ask him this question? Ling Han smiled, and said, the 2 princes each have their individual merits. Who exactly is more suitable? I believe that De Yuan King, your majesty, you have your own thoughts. Then what need is there for me to speak more on the subject? The De Yuan King once again broke out into loud laughter as he thought silently, this slippery kid, his argument is watertight. He once again changed the topic, and said, I have one more daughter who has yet to marry. Are you willing to become my son-in-law? Damn, were all the people from the royal house of the De Yuan King so direct? Previously, when he went to register himself for the tournament, the chief butler had also attempted some matchmaking on the spot. And now, this man, the actual father of the girl, was the same, as if he was in a hurry to marry off his daughter. Ling Han hurriedly waved his hands, and said, my heart is fully focused on martial arts, and within the next few years, I will not consider marriage. The De Yuan King could not help feeling that it was quite a pity. Even Zhu He Xian, Zhang Weishan and Duanwu Changfeng treated Ling Han with utmost respect, so obviously this young man had terrifying ability in the field of alchemy. If the latter could become his son-in-law, then he would become an unimaginable aid to their family branch. But since Ling Han had already tactfully declined the offer, as a king, he could not be so shameless as to insist. Moreover, his daughter was beautiful, so it was not like there was no one willing to marry her. If you encounter any troubles in future, you may come and ask me for help. The De Yuan King gave Ling Han a very heavy promise. Even if he could not manage to become Ling Han's father-in-law, he was still determined to maintain an affable relationship with this young man. Many thanks for your generosity. Ling Han accepted this favor with grace. After all, the current him was still too weak, so he still needed this kind of support and assistance. When he returned to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, he discovered that the 4th prince had come to pay him a visit, and had been waiting for a very long time for his return. The 4th prince conversed with him for a very long time, but did not really say anything substantial. He was simply trying to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Obviously, the fourth prince knew that he was too weak to actually persuade Ling Han to join his ranks. As a result, it was only a relationship between two contemporaries, and the fourth prince didn't even hint that he intended to have Ling Han join him as an underling. On Ling Han's side, he did not mind having another friend, and so, the two of them naturally had a very delightful conversation. After resting one more day, the actual day of the De Yuan tournament had finally arrived. The first thing on the agenda was to draw lots. After confirming the 50 seated participants, the other participants would be divided into groups based on the lots they drew. They would be separated into 50 small groups, which would respectively ascend to their own tournament stage. Then the battle would begin, and the last person standing on the tournament stage would be one of the top 50 participants of this De Yuan tournament, successfully obtaining a place of enrollment into Huyang Academy. Ling Han had also obtained the place of a seated participant, and this guaranteed that in the first round of battle, he would not encounter any opponents that were too powerful. Of course, no matter how strong his opponent was, he would still hold no fear. Big Brother Ling. Li Hao and the others were standing nearby, waving at him. Chapter 66, Tournament begins. I'm done for this time. I drew the 7th group, and I heard that the seeded elite in that group is Sima Wendong. He's the strongest member in his generation of the Sima clan of De Yuan City, and he's already reached the 7th layer of element gathering tier. Lu Dong sighed, shaking his head. I'm worse off. I'm in the first group, and the seeded elite of my group is the 4th prince. I really don't have a sliver of hope left now. Zhu Shui sighed similarly, but she quickly became excited, and said, but it's possible that Li Hao may advance and obtain a spot to enroll in the academy. Ling Han glanced over at Li Hao. Within this time of over a month, he had managed to reach the late period of the 3rd layer of element gathering tier. This, of course, was due to the effects of the 3 transcending origin pills he had taken. With this kind of cultivation level, along with his saber chi, the possibility of Li Hao managing to advance was very high. After all, he had drawn the 40th something group, where the seeded elite was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Although a person in the 4th layer still possessed a great advantage against someone in the 3rd layer, Li Hao had saber chi, which would be more than sufficient to compensate for the gap between himself and his opponent. Additionally, the seeded elite had to face the imminent danger of being ganged up on by everyone else. As long as Li Hao was low-key enough, concealing his power for a sudden eruption at the very end, then it was very possible that he would be the one having the last laugh. Lu Dong and the others were very envious. They had also asked for Li Hao's guidance on saber chi, but no matter how much effort they exerted, they still could not manage to form chi. When we were in Guorak town, we thought we were the strongest. But it was only when we came here that we realized that the real gathering spot for geniuses was this De Yuan city. Parties like the Jin clan and the Lu clan can so easily produce 10+ seeded elites. Chen Pengju shook his head, his face filled with disappointment. He and Zhou Chang managed to break through to the element gathering tier with the help of the green spiritual fruit. However, there were so many powerful warriors gathered for the De Yuan tournament this time. If one did not at the very least possess the prowess of the 4th layer of element gathering tier, then unless he was like Li Hao who had managed to form saber chi, there was absolutely no chance of obtaining a place in the top 50. Big Brother Ling, what about you? Which group did you draw? The 5 of them looked at Ling Han in askance. They were all well aware that Ling Han was very powerful, so as long as he drew a good lot, then the chances of him being able to advance into the top 50 were extremely high. Ling Han smiled, and said, I'm the seated participant of the 40th group. Pooh! Lu Dong and the others all choked, and they looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at some kind of monster. A few months ago, this guy had still been the same as them, also in the body refining tier, yet now, he actually managed to become a seated elite? How could they not be shocked by such a thing? They were also filled with disbelief. You're actually in the 4th layer of element gathering tier already? Li Hao punched a fist on Ling Han's chest jokingly. But once he recalled that Ling Han had given him 2 extra transcending origin pills, and had also declared truthfully that he had more in his possession, then it was nothing strange for him to be able to advance to the 4th layer of element gathering tier in that span of time. If he's a seeded participant, then he'd be able to avoid encountering the other elites. Plus, Big Brother Ling still has sword chi, so he'd definitely be able to win. Lu Dong said, his face filled with envy. Zhu Shui and the others nodded in agreement. If you managed to enter the top 50, you'd be able to obtain a ticket into Huyang Academy, which was the dream of every martial artist in Rain Country. If they knew what had happened the night before, they'd probably be shocked to the point that their eyes would practically pop out. He actually managed to have 3 black-grade alchemists follow behind him. Ha ha ha, you want to win? That's impossible. An arrogant voice exclaimed, and a young man appeared in front of them. He was Feng Luo. Previously, after they had managed to kill the red-scaled dragon snake, he had attempted to steal the fruits of their labor. Yet, in the end, due to the final counterattack, all his underlings were killed, while he himself received a harsh thrashing at Ling Han's hands, but fortunately managed to survive. They had never thought that he would reappear so quickly with his lofty, arrogant attitude in front of them. There was absolutely no improvement to his cultivation, and he was still in the 9th layer of body refining tier. For the majority of martial artists, that one step into the element gathering tier was an extremely hard one to take. It was not strange at all to spend more than 10 years to take that single step, which was also why Hang Zhan had been so overbearing and forceful, using any means possible to steal the green spiritual fruit. Big Brother Ling is a seeded elite and he's very powerful. Why wouldn't he win? Zhu Shui asked Feng Luo. Because I am also in the 40th group. Feng Luo declared confidently. Ha 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 ha. Lu Dong and the others broke out into laughter. One side was in the element gathering tier, while the other was still in the 9th layer of body refining tier. The gap between their respective prowess could really be compared to the gap between heaven and earth. No matter how it was, Feng Luo really did not have a sliver of a chance at winning. Laugh, go on and laugh. You'll be crying in the afternoon. Feng Luo spoke coldly. Lu Dong and the others were all curious. What kind of trump card was hidden up his sleeve that allowed him to have such overwhelming confidence? Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. Feng Luo laughed loudly, walking away with his head held high. Don't worry about him, he's just a nasty character. Ling Han said, smiling. The other 5 nodded in agreement. The drawing of lots was completed before noon, and they would be having the tournament stage battles in the afternoon to select the 50 strongest martial artists. After that, there would be another round of battles the next day to decide the 10 strongest as well as the first place. After lunch, everyone soon arrived at the wrestling ring in the city. There would usually be various martial arts activities held here. During the new year, when a ceremony to offer sacrifices to the gods took place, there were also martial artist versus demonic beast battles held in this location. As a result, the yellow sand of the wrestling ring had been soaked with blood since long ago. Today, because of the De Yuan tournament, all other activities and events were of course suspended. There were already 10 tournament stages put up in the gigantic sandy zone in the center. Later, there would be simultaneously 10 groups battling it out on the stages, and it would all be finished after only 5 rounds. Ling Han was the seed participant of the 40th group, so he had to wait until the 4th round to go up onto the stage. Lu Dong and Zhu Shui were in the first round. One of them was on the first tournament stage, while the other was on the 7th. There were about 70 people in one group, and the difference in numbers between different groups were in the single digits, because it was possible that there would be some who would forfeit at the last second. There was absolutely no suspense about the conclusion of the first round. All the victors were the seeded elites. They were all like the 4th prince, in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so even if the others all joined forces to gang up on a seeded elite, they were still no match for him. Moreover, in the case of the 4th prince, who would actually dare to offend this man who may become the next Yuan king? They obviously did not dare to join forces against him. Additionally, the elites who took part in the first round were also the strongest of the 50. They were all in the top 10 of the previous De Yuan tournament, like the fourth prince, Jin Wuji and Li Dongyu. Occasionally, in the second and the third round, there would be an unknown martial artist who managed to win, but victory did not fall to either Chen Pengju and Zhou Chang. The two of them were mercilessly eliminated from the tournament. Thankfully, they'd be able to get another chance 3 years later. By that time, it was highly likely that they would have managed to reach the middle stage of element gathering tier and thus become seeded elites, and so would have a bigger chance of advancing to the next round. This also confirmed the value of the green spiritual fruit. Otherwise, they may have only just reached element gathering tier 3 years later, so there'd be no second chance for them. Honor, go on. Ling Dongxing lightly patted Ling Han's shoulder, smiling brightly. The fourth round was about to begin. Half a year ago, he would have never been able to imagine that it was possible his own son to obtain the place of a seeded elite. Lu Yutong nodded to Ling Han. She did not have the slightest bit of doubt that it was possible for Ling Han to lose. As a seeded elite, Ling Han was the first person to step onto the stage, while the other participants in his group would follow after. There were about 70 of them, and Feng Luo was one of them. Begin. A warrior in Gushing Spring Tier announced. He had been assigned as a referee by the royal house of the De Yuan king. Ha ha ha, clear the area. Feng Luo declared proudly. Instantly, there were at least 30 people who drew their weapons simultaneously and gathered with Feng Luo protected in the center. Then, they began to push on towards the others. The audience below the stage were all dumbfounded. Was this even okay? It was really too shameless. Chapter 67, Just a Bunch of Sheep. This is too despicable. Downstage, Zhu Shuai and the others had all started shouting in anger. No wonder Feng Luo had been so sure of himself. He had apparently bribed some of the martial artists in the same group to work for him. More than 30 of them were working together, and since this was the 40th group, the seeded elite would not be too strong, thus they'd be more than enough to sweep away all other contenders. Then, the others would all leave the stage of their own free will, so the remaining Feng Luo would naturally be able to obtain a place in the top 50. And he of course would not unreasonably demand to enter the top 10, and definitely not the first place. After all top 50 participants were guaranteed to be enrolled into Huyang Academy. He's too shameless. Completely unfair. All the others downstage had started calling out as well. This was an act of openly breaking the tournament regulations. Yet the referee only gave a cold humph and shouted, "Shut up." Since the tournament regulations did not specify that it was not allowed for individual martial artists to join forces, then Feng Luo's actions were of course allowed. It could at most be argued that he had managed to take advantage of a loophole in the rules. What power and influence a warrior in Gushing Spring Tier possessed. All the people downstage were immediately silenced. No wonder that guy had been so confident. He had already bribed some of the others in his group, Zhu Shuai said, extremely angry. To be ganged up on by so many people, plus at least more than 10 of them have already reached element gathering tier. It would be difficult for Ling Han to fight against the onslaught of so many. He's going to be in big trouble. Lu Dong frowned. Not necessarily. Li Hao shook his head, and said, Big Brother Ling should have already reached the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Furthermore, he has even formed 4 flashes of sword chi, so there is still a chance for him to win. He definitely has to win. That guy, Feng Luo, is really too despicable. The 5 of them all began to cheer Ling Han on. Compared to them, Lu Yutong and Lu Dongxing were extremely calm. A bunch of sheep working together would still only be a bunch of sheep. How could they possibly be able to match a mighty lion? Ha ha ha, leave this guy for last. Chase all the others off the stage. Feng Luo crowed, and commanded the group of more than 30 martial artists to begin wiping out the others. Their combined might was extremely powerful, and due to their cooperation, they had managed to get all the other outsiders, aside from Ling Han, off the stage, and that was with the mere price of 7 of their numbers being pulled down alongside their victims. Now, this was a battle of 29 against 1, and out of the 29, 14 were in element gathering tier. Oh no, though this brat is a seeded elite, since he's been arranged to be in the 40th group, that means that he's most likely only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Yeah, many ants can kill even an elephant, and the other party even has 10 plus warriors in element gathering tier working for him. I really can't bear to look at that guy, Feng Luo's expression at having his villainous scheme succeeding. Hush, lower your voices. Although the Feng clan isn't a major clan, Feng Luo's elder brother is a well-known genius in our De Yuan city. In the last round of De Yuan tournament, he managed to defeat the 4th prince to get the 1st place. I heard he's already stepped into Gushing Spring tier. What, Gushing Spring tier, is that true? Of course it's true. Hiss, no wonder that guy, Feng Luo, dares to be so arrogant. Listening to the discussions of those downstage, Feng Luo felt extremely proud of himself. He did break the rules, but so what? What, you guys can't accept this? He challenged the people downstage, bite me if you can. You can do something like this too if you have a good elder brother like me. Most of the audience offstage started gnashing their teeth in hatred. They really felt that this guy was despicable down to the bones, making them all feel the urge to rush onto the stage to give him a good thrashing. Ling Han, previously, you made use of the advantage in numbers against me, but this time, I have so many people on my side. Even if every one of them only hit you once, they'd be able to give you a terrible thrashing. If you know what's good for you, then kneel down immediately and beg me for mercy. I may even consider hitting you a few times less. Feng Luo said, pointing at Ling Han. Had it been them bullying him because of them having an advantage in numbers previously? Indeed, at the time, all his lackeys had died, while Ling Han's side had 7 people, so that was actually them bullying him because of their advantage in numbers? This guy was indeed shameless to a whole new level. Ling Han shook his head, and said, looks like if I don't hurry up and throw you off the stage and allow a clown like you to continue your performance, the fury of the masses would probably be incited. Ha ha ha, laughter broke out instantly downstage. What a hateful guy, you still dare to be so stubborn. I won't spare you. Feng Luo was driven practically mad from fury. He extended a finger and pointed at Ling Han and said, beat him, give him a good beating. Understood. The group of more than 20 people all rushed towards Ling Han. All of them were brandishing their respective weapons, presenting a fierce image. The tournament stage battles allowed the use of weapons. Otherwise, the martial artists would not be able to display their strongest abilities. However, this also increased the danger of the battles. So if you were afraid of dying, then it would be best if you quickly jumped off the stage on your own. If you stayed on the stage, then you should have a certain level of mental preparation. Ling Han did not bother to use his sword. He charged over with only his fists. Using dashing panther fists would be more than enough to handle these people. Pang, 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 pang. He charged forward and every single person who stood in his way was flung off stage with a single punch from him. One has to understand that although his cultivation level was only the 4th layer of element gathering tier, with the eruption of the 5 elements origin nuclei, his prowess could be compared with that of a normal person in the 8th layer of element gathering tier. Additionally, the dashing panther fists was a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique, so wouldn't it be more than enough for him to single-handedly deal with these people? By the time Ling Han reached Feng Luo, all the others had been thrown off stage by him. There was absolute silence. Wasn't this guy too powerful? Since he was the seed of the 40th group, then shouldn't it be obvious that he was only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier at most? But judging from his ferocious attacks, that was definitely power that was at least of the late stage of element gathering tier. Could it be that he had deliberately hidden his actual cultivation level, pretending to be a pig to devour the tiger? However, there were naturally the older generations of the various great clans present on this occasion, so there was no lack of people with cultivation levels above the 5th layer of element gathering tier. Naturally, They managed to easily sense Ling Han's aura, and it definitely showed that he was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. This caused them to be confused as well. They all started murmuring amongst themselves, exchanging their thoughts about how this could be possible. No, impossible. Feng Luo said, shivering. His expression was one of complete disbelief. The script wasn't supposed to be like this. He should have successfully and easily entered into Huyang Academy. Then, with the care and assistance of his brother, easily break through to element gathering tier. If he was lucky, he'd be able to consume some kind of spiritual fruit, and may even be able to break through to gushing spring tier. But all of his plans were rendered useless if he couldn't manage to enter into Huyang Academy. Arrogant, just continue being arrogant. Ha ha ha, just continue staying on stage, if you dare. The people downstage all started taunting Feng Luo. They had already long been displeased by this guy, but just now, because he had a lot of people on his side, they didn't dare to make too much of a fuss. But what about now? Who would have imagined that Ling Han would actually be so powerful? You immediately admit defeat, then get off the stage. Otherwise, I will tell my brother to take care of you. With the taunting resounding in his ears, Feng Luo finally reacted. He actually pointed at Ling Han, and commanded him to give up. Ling Han shook his head. This guy had really been spoilt. He was a complete idiot. Pa! He leapt and aimed a kick at Feng Luo's lower abdomen. So, the guy flew off stage. He held onto his lower abdomen, gasping in pain. It even looked like he was about to tear up from the pain. 40th group, Ling Han wins. The referee announced. No. This place is mine. It's mine. When Feng Luo heard this, he actually jumped up and said to the referee, change your judgment immediately, or else I'll have my brother beat you to death. Everyone else instantly broke out into incredulous laughter. Someone merely in body refining tier actually dared to threaten a warrior of gushing spring tier. It was absolutely hilarious. Get lost. The referee gave a cold humph. He stretched out a hand and gathered his origin power to form a gigantic hand, which took hold of Feng Luo and threw him out. Chapter 68, The Second Battle. Origin power being able to take on a form, this was the symbol of a warrior of gushing spring tier. Surrounded by taunts and mocking laughter, Feng Luo fled with his tail between his legs. If it was not due to the fact that his elder brother, Feng Yan, was indeed an incomparable genius, then that warrior of gushing spring tier absolutely had the right to kill him on the spot. The most important thing in martial arts was the hierarchy of martial artists, and Feng Luo's previous actions could practically be considered a grave breach of these unspoken rules, so even if he had killed him, the Feng clan would dare not make a fuss about it. Brother Ling, congratulations. Congratulations, Brother Ling, for having such an excellent son. Brother Ling, this time you'll have to host a dinner banquet in celebration. After looking up at the stage, many of the major characters of the various clans of Grey Cloud Town began offering their congratulations to Ling Dongxing. Ling Dongxing naturally laughed loudly at this, absolutely delighted. Before, he had also imagined such a scene happening, but he knew this was not a realistic dream. He never thought that there would be a day that this dream would become reality. Ha 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 ha, this stupid brat is just lucky enough to obtain a place of enrollment into Huyang Academy. There shouldn't be any chance of him advancing further than this. He shook his head, looking very modest. Actually, anyone could see that he was smiling so wide that the corners of his lips seemed like they were about to split apart from the effort. It was obvious that he was close to being beside himself with joy. True, whoever it was that had a son that was qualified enough to enter into Huyang Academy, he would also smile so proudly. Brother Ling, you don't have to be so modest. For those of us who came from Grey Cloud Town, it is already very impressive to be able to enter the top 50. Moreover, your son is only 17 years old this year. So he'd still be able to enter the De Yuan tournament that will be held 3 years later and 6 years later. Who knows, maybe in the next tournament, he'd qualify for the top 10, and in the one after, he'd place first, someone said with a laugh. Although Ling Han had fought a beautiful battle this time, but still, his opponents this time were really too weak. None of them thought that he, with his cultivation of only the 4th layer of element gathering tier, would be able to enter the top 10, let alone defeat those in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, like the 4th prince. Ling Dongxing laughed mischievously. He of course could not say that his son was full of grand ambitions, and that he was aiming directly to get the first place this time. Honestly, he too did not dare believe it. After all, the gap between cultivation levels was too great. Ling Han walked down the stage, and everyone stepped forward to offer their congratulations. After all, anyone who managed to enter into Huyang Academy had excellent prospects in his future. Who knows, they may be able to become an overnight celebrity and become a person that would hold immense status and power in this Rain country. As a result, no one would mind speaking a few words of praise at this moment. In any case, they wouldn't lose anything from it, right? And if Ling Han managed to end up with great achievements in the future, they'd be able to climb to a higher status using their friendly relations with him. Ling Dongxing, as the clan head of the Ling clan, was no stranger to this kind of social niceties. He took care of everything, making everyone feel that they have been paid adequate attention. Father and son, as well as Lu Yutong, returned to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. After one night of rest, the battles to decide the top 10 from the 50 who advanced into the second round would take place. In truth, the top 10 would all receive rewards. Of course, the further ahead your placement, the better your prize. On the other side, Li Hao had also managed to advance into the top 50, and had demonstrated extraordinary talent with his saber qi, causing many people to be very optimistic about his future prospects, as there were no more than 10 in this generation of young people of De Yuan City that have managed to form qi. However, some of the senior members of the Li clan had arrived with Li Hao, so naturally, they had to celebrate with their own people first the night before. Thus, they did not invite Ling Han, and neither did they invite Lu Dong and the others. But once they returned to Guorok town, the Li clan would definitely hold a grand celebratory banquet. The next day, Ling Han and Lu Yutong once again arrived at the wrestling ring of the city. Meanwhile, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Wei Shan were in the process of concocting the reverse pill, and have long since entered the oblivious mode, so they did not come to watch Ling Han compete. Big brother Ling. Li Hao walked over and stood by his side. He then directed a respectful gaze at the 4th prince, Li Dongyu and the others. They had all been people that he had once idolized and looked up to. He'd never thought that he would be able to compete with them now, causing him to feel unreasonably exhilarated. Do not look down on yourself. You have already formed saber qi, so your future achievements will definitely exceed them. Ling Han said, giving him a comforting pat on the shoulder. Li Hao nodded seriously. In truth, the real difference between himself and the 4th prince and the others was his lacking cultivation level. But since he's already managed to form saber qi, he too would be able to become a ruler amongst those of the same cultivation level in future. Brother Ling. When they saw Ling Han approach, the 4th prince and the others clasped their hands politely and spoke up in greeting. Li Hao could not help gaping at this. This Ling Han was really too popular, wasn't he? As if he was the moon which the stars could only revolve around. Even the 4th prince was not as popular as he was. That was natural. Currently, there stood 3 dignified black-grade alchemists behind him, so from a certain angle, he was even more influential than the De Yuan king. The battles to decide the top 10 will begin now. The chief butler appeared. His eyes were squinted, making him look like a doddering old man. However, his voice was extremely loud and clear, spreading to every nook and cranny of the wrestling ring. The rules are very simple. There are 10 tournament stages here. Choose any which one and walk onto the stage. If there's no one there, then you will be the stage master. If there's already someone, then you will challenge the stage master. Everyone will only have a single chance to challenge the stage master. By sundown, the 10 people who are remaining on the tournament stage will be the top 10. This was indeed very simple. They simply had to battle it out. When the chief butler had finished speaking, the majority of the participants all looked at the fourth prince, Li Dongyu, and the others. These people possessed overwhelming power, so if any of the others wanted to obtain a place in the top 10, then they'd definitely want to avoid encountering these powerful warriors. The fourth prince laughed loudly, and exuded the air of a ruler. He gave a great leap and landed on the first tournament stage, where he stood with his arms crossed behind his waist, waiting to be challenged. I'll present myself first. Li Dongyu leapt onto the second tournament stage. Jin Wuji, Bailey Tingyun, Xia Zhong and the others also respectively claimed a tournament stage, and in an instant, 7 tournament stages were owned. These people all had absolute confidence and were not the slightest bit worried that they'd be tired out by fighting one battle after another. Ling Han took one step forward, also preparing to step onto one of the remaining stages. Big brother Ling, let's just wait until the afternoon. We'll have a bigger chance that way, Li Hao hurriedly advised. It's fine. There are not many here who can match me, Ling Han gave a nonchalant wave of his hand. He gave a great leap and landed on the 8th tournament stage. Soon after, the 9th and 10th tournament stages were also occupied, and with that, the 10 stage masters have appeared. Now, it was time to see who would go up to challenge them. I'll go. Someone jumped up onto the 10th tournament stage and the first battle began. Right after, another person leapt up onto the 9th tournament stage. But what made the audience feel very curious about was that no one actually went to challenge Ling Han. There was no lack of elites in the 9th layer of element gathering tier here, so naturally they should be able to sense that Ling Han was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. So theoretically, this kind of cultivation level was the lowest of all 10 stage masters, but why didn't anyone go up to challenge him? They didn't understand. The majority of those who advanced into the top 50 had attended the fourth prince's banquet just a few days ago, so of course they knew that Ling Han actually had the support of 3 black-grade alchemists. Who would dare challenge him? Do you not intend to give face to the 3 alchemists behind Ling Han? In any case, aside from the fourth prince, Li Dongyu, and other such powerful warriors, there were still 2 or 3 slightly weaker competitors. So there was no need for them to stir up the hornet's nest that was Ling Han. But of course, the unexpected could still happen. I will challenge you. A young man jumped up onto Ling Han's tournament stage. He was a dark horse that had suddenly appeared in the De Yuan tournament this time, so he had not received an invitation to the fourth prince's banquet a few days ago. As a result, he naturally had no idea of Ling Han's background. Chapter 69, Top 10. My name is Du Zhengying. Remember my name, because soon, this name will be known all around the world. The young man exclaimed proudly. This man looked to be in his early 20s, and his cultivation level was the 6th layer of element gathering tier. Who knew where he got such overwhelming self-confidence from? But only he himself knew that he had only been in the 9th layer of body refining tier 2 years ago, and could not manage to break through to element gathering tier. Yet he obtained a fateful encounter, which caused his cultivation level to spike up. After only 2 years, he was already in the 6th layer of element gathering tier. After such instantaneous success, he naturally became condescending towards everything, and thought that he'd be able to reach the 9th layer of element gathering tier next year and break through to gushing spring tier in the year after, sweeping away all the other geniuses and elites of the world. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, being too idle would be a bit boring anyways, so I'll play with you for a while. How dare you? Du Zhengying leapt forward suddenly, the long saber at his waist drawn. The light of the saber flickered, exuding a coldness like frost. He gave a loud shout and brandished his saber in a slash, which formed a terrifying cold flash that flew towards Ling Han's waist. The advantage of a sword was its lightness, while the saber had its ferocity. This saber slash was fierce and merciless, so it did have a certain level of standard. Ling Han drew his sword, and with it a ding, the blade of the sword screamed as it passed over the saber's blade all the way to the hilt of the saber, easily dispersing the power of this slash as it kicked up a rain of sparks. The blade of Du Jingying's saber stopped at a spot 3 inches below Ling Han's rib, but its energy was completely exhausted and it was no longer a threat. You do have some ability, Du Jingying snorted coldly, but in front of me, all that is pointless effort. I'm destined to be a genius that will become world famous. Everyone else is only fated to become stepping stones on my path to advance, to be mercilessly swept away by me. He resumed his offensive. Shwa, 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 the saber flashed, striking with considerable power. Those who were standing downstage were completely struck speechless. They have seen many proud people, but Du Jingying was not just proud anymore. He was already arrogant to the point that he didn't know his own measure. Ling Han casually parried his attacks. In any case, the tournament stage battles would only end by sundown, so there was no difference whether he defeated Du Jingying sooner or later. Du Jingying shouted and yelled, using all his ultimate techniques. From the look of it, he was at an absolute advantage. He naturally thought that this was to be expected. His opponent was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, a whole 2 layers below him, so how could Ling Han be a match for him? To be able to disregard the gap between cultivation levels and challenge one at a higher cultivation level was of course something that only he could do. Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. I have to admit that you really are not bad. But everything will cease at this point, I'm about to get serious. Du Jingying laughed loudly, causing everyone else to think that he was even more of an idiot than before. His expression grew serious, and he once again brandished his blade. Shwa, there actually appeared a flash of saber chi. E.N. Gasps exploded downstage all of a sudden. Saber chi. It can't be. That's the sign of a ruler. I didn't realize that this egomaniac was actually quite capable. This time, Ling Han should not be able to parry his attacks anymore. I heard that there are no more than 10 within this generation that have managed to grasp chi. Du Jingying was very proud of himself. If it was not because he had managed to form saber chi, how would he dare keep such a high profile? He laughed loudly, and said, to be able to make me use saber chi, you should feel very honored. Ling Han shook his head and said in disappointment, you only have 1 flash of saber chi? Hey, what kind of expression is that? Isn't 1 flash of saber chi already very awesome? Du Zhengyi was extremely displeased. After seeing him forming saber chi, this brat was still not scared witless. It's enough to defeat you 100 times. He yelled loudly. He started brandishing his saber in a dance, and his saber chi moved unhindered. The power behind it was extremely terrifying. Ling Han laughed and casually waved his own sword in a slash, similarly producing a flash of sword chi. Pooh! Everyone downstage choked in shock. Those who managed to form chi would have the potential to be a ruler in martial arts. But normally, 4 flashes of chi would be regarded as a minor accomplishment, 7 flashes as a major accomplishment, while 10 flashes would be completion. And only those who managed to reach the level of minor accomplishment had the right to be named as rulers. But even if only 1 flash of chi was formed, that was already a very big deal, as it was extremely rare. Thus, now that there appeared 2 people who have both managed to form chi and were even battling on the same stage, it naturally caused everyone to gasp in surprise. This was something that they had expected would only happen at tomorrow's battle, at the very least. What, you actually also have sword chi? Du Jingying's eyes were wide with astonishment. He looked extremely shocked. Is this very odd? Ling Han said with a laugh. So what if you possess sword chi, you'll definitely still be no match for me. Du Jingying raised his saber up high, standing in an attacking stance. The fateful encounter that he had obtained included a book of saber arts and a bottle of alchemical pills. The alchemical pills allowed him to break through to element gathering tier and also caused his cultivation to soar. The book of saber arts was also extraordinary. It contained 2 different stages. The first stage was a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique, whereas the second stage was upgraded to black-grade low-level. He was only in element-gathering tier, so naturally only managed to learn the first stage. Yet it already allowed him to form saber chi, which was proof enough of the extraordinary power of this saber arts technique. Cleaving mountain saber arts. He roared loudly. He brandished his saber in a slash, and the saber chi he produced looked like a dragon, extremely dazzling and possessing a terrifying level of power. Ling Han's sword rose in a slant, using the shocking electricity sword arts, and the sword chi he possessed flew forwards. Pung! Sword chi and saber chi crashed into one another and caused a sudden explosion. A dazzling light appeared, and it was visible that the saber chi was actually completely shattered by Ling Han's attack. His sword chi, like a rainbow, continued forward to cut into Du Zhengying's chest. Instantly, blood splattered. Ah! Du Zhengying gave a pained shout, and was flung directly off stage by the power of the sword chi. See! Everyone was overwhelmed with shock. Both martial artists had formed chi, yet why was there such a big gap between their respective power? There were only a few who had also managed to form chi. It was only them that knew that there were stronger and weaker chi. It was definitely not something that guaranteed you success if you just managed to form it. However, no matter how weak it was still chi, so it was impossible that it couldn't even withstand a single attack. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so difficult to form chi in the first place. That could only mean one thing: Ling Han's sword chi possessed overwhelming power. Even the 4th prince, Li Dongyu, and the other stage masters who occupied the earlier stages revealed expressions of shock. This kind of attack power caused even them to be slightly surprised. Yet they thought that their cultivation level was so much higher than Ling Han, so they absolutely could still suppress him with their much stronger prowess. Such an easy victory also caused Ling Han's image to become stronger and taller, letting everyone know that he was not as simple as simply depending on 3 alchemists as support for himself. The challenges continued. Most of the people had focused their attention on the 9th and 10th tournament stages. The stage masters of these 2 stages were the weakest and had already expended much energy during the continuous battles. This was the best path to obtain a place in the top 10 for everyone else. When the sun set, the top 10 martial artists were decided. There was not much surprise this time round, as the top 10 were mostly within expectations. Though Li Hao tried his best in his battles, his lacking cultivation level was a very solid disadvantage. The best he could do was to fight evenly with someone in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, but against a stronger person, he could only accept defeat. Ling Dongxing was again surrounded by the masses. Most of them had not thought that Ling Han could actually manage to advance into the top 10. This was an extremely huge honor. In future, he may even have a chance of becoming a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier. This naturally caused Ling Dongxing to beam with joy. When he saw that his son managed to attain such an accomplishment, he was the most delighted out of all of them. If he advanced one step further the next day, then he'd be able to get the dark moon grass. Ling Han was filled with anticipation. Chapter 70, Son of Heaven Fist Technique. The night passed silently. On the next day, the 3rd round of the De Yuan tournament continued. This was the finals, and today, the first place winner would be decided. Can Hana really get the first place? Ling Dongxing was both expectant and anxious. Before the tournament began, he believed that his son would be able to at least advance into the top 50, but dared not dream that he would also make into the top 10. After all, Ling Han's cultivation level was honestly still too low. But Ling Han's extraordinary success the previous day had been a very joyous surprise to Ling Dongxing, making a sliver of expectation for that illusory first-place rise in him. However, on the path to that first place, there stood powerful warriors like the 4th prince, Li Dongyu, and Jin Wuji. Even if he himself was the one competing, he couldn't be sure that he would win, what more his son. Initially, it was fine because he didn't really bear any real expectations. But now that a spark of hope had flickered to life within him, he had become worried about winning and losing. Lu Yutong smiled, and said, "You don't have to worry, uncle. Since Ling Han said he can get the first place, then he'll definitely get the first place." Ling Dongxing was astounded. This girl actually had more confidence in his son than even him. Looks like her affections for Ling Han have become deeply rooted. When he thought about this, he no longer bothered to worry too much about the first place. If his son could obtain such an excellent partner, then he really would die happy. The regulations for today's tournament round are as follows. The chief butler continued to be the host of the tournament. You shall go up onto the 10 tournament stages according to yesterday's order. This would be your temporary placement. Anyone who is ranked lower can challenge the person one rank higher. If you win, you will replace him. But if you lose, you can only stay on your own stage and defend, and you will no longer be able to issue any challenges. When everyone has lost the right to challenge others, or when the sun sets, your final rankings will be confirmed. After every battle, both sides will have half an hour to rest. In that time, you may only challenge, but cannot be challenged. The moment the chief butler finished talking, Li Dongyu took a great leap and arrived on the first tournament stage. He said, "Fourth Prince, I would like to challenge you." I too want to see if your little Tianyuan hands has advanced to the 7th level," Qi Yongyi laughed heartily. He leapt up and also arrived on the tournament stage. "It will definitely not disappoint you." Li Dongyu gave a long hiss, raised his hands and charged towards Qi Yongyi in attack. The two of them were both in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. 3 years ago, they were close rivals, but the 4th prince was slightly better. These 3 years, Li Dongyu had buried himself in cultivation, and there was an extremely obvious improvement in his abilities. "Brotherly, your improvement is indeed very large, but if I have to be honest, it was a great miscalculation on your part to stay into Yuan City in a sulk." Qi Yongyi displayed a fist technique. Every fist was imposingly majestic, like the arrival of a noble ruler. It not only possessed great force but also the ability to shake the heart, causing a powerful shudder to rise up from the depths of their hearts. The Imperial City is the real sacred land of martial arts. There, you will encounter even stronger opponents, and every one of them is so strong that it will give you the shivers. Under this kind of pressure, the improvement in my abilities is far from what you can imagine. Take this, my son of heaven fist technique. Hong, 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 his movements were very pronounced and every fist possessed overbearing power. A layer of qi was wrapped around his fists, increasing the might behind each blow. It was fist qi. Li Dongyu was very shocked. He could only retreat in the face of Qi Yongye's fists. His expression revealed deep regret. 3 years ago, he had only been slightly weaker than Qi Yongyi. After a tough battle of at least 500 moves, he had been defeated due to being at a very slight disadvantage. Yet now, the battle had only just begun, and he was already suppressed by his opponent. He didn't even have the opportunity to fight back against the 4th prince's terrifying fist technique. Pang! He received a heavy punch and his figure retreated continuously. A sliver of blood could be seen at the corners of his lips. "I am not a match for you," he said bitterly. They were both in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, yet he was not just a slight bit weaker than his opponent. His opponent was on a wholly different level than himself. "This is the Son of Heaven fist technique taught to me by His Imperial Majesty. There is no shame in losing to this fist technique." Qi Yongyi smiled, giving his opponent a way out. His Imperial Majesty was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier. How could any martial arts technique that he taught not be extremely powerful? There are 4 different levels for this fist technique. The power of the first level reaches a yellow grade high level technique, the second level is a black grade low level, the third level is a black grade medium level, and the 4th level is a black grade high level martial arts technique. Qi Yongyi said with a smile, His Imperial Majesty has a fondness for talent, and there is a considerable number of geniuses in the Imperial City who have been taught the Son of Heaven fist technique. On the spectators' seats, everyone had exclaimed in surprise. The 4th prince was really too powerful. In the previous De Yuan tournament, Li Dongyu could still manage a tie with the fourth prince, but this time, he couldn't even hold on for 10 moves. They all looked at the fourth prince with envy. The fourth level of the Son of Heaven fist technique was equivalent to a black grade high-level martial arts technique. If they actually managed to learn up to that level, unfortunately, although His Imperial Majesty was fond of talent, how could he possibly pass on a black grade high-level martial arts technique so easily? At most, he should have only passed on the first and second level. But, a black grade low-level martial arts technique was awesome enough. One has to know that even among the great clans of De Yuan City there were not many clans who had in their possession a black grade martial arts technique. How about it? Brotherly, are you interested to come with me to the Huyang Academy this time? Qi Yongyi laughed. Li Dongyu could not stop a slightly moved expression from showing on his face. The gap in power between himself and the fourth prince allowed him to finally gain his resolve. De Yuan City was too small. He had to go out of this city to be able to obtain a greater improvement. He returned to the second tournament stage, and the battles continued. However, because he had just battled, no one could challenge him yet. Jin Wuji, I would like to challenge you. From the fourth tournament stage, Bailey Tingyun gave a long hiss and leapt up onto the third tournament stage. Jin Wuji smiled serenely and crossed his arms behind his back, looking very casual. He stretched his arms a bit then said, "Then I'll give you a bit of guidance." He was also a disciple of Huyang Academy. After 3 years of hard work at cultivation, the improvement to his abilities was obvious. The only person that he took seriously among the other competitors was the fourth prince. The two of them began their battle. Bailey Tingyun was indeed extraordinary to be able to break through to the 8th layer of element gathering tier at the mere age of 17 years old. His prowess was only slightly weaker than Jin Wuji's and every move he made was powerful, causing the expressions of quite a few of the seniors in the 9th layer of element gathering tier to waver as they pondered that, if it was them battling against him, there was a possibility that they would be completely defeated. Yet Jin Wuji moved very skillfully, and with a single hand, he easily dispersed the power behind Bailey Tingyun's every attack, showing that he possessed a power greater than his opponents. He really proves himself to have returned from Huyang Academy. He's really too powerful. They're all in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, but most of them may not be a match for 1/10 of Jin Wuji. For this tournament, we only need to look at him and the fourth prince. One of the two of them would definitely get the first place. True, there's definitely no doubt about it. Hearing the discussions of the people around him, Bailey Tingyun gave a HN and drew a short staff from behind him. He gave it a light shake, and from both ends, there actually appeared another section. It had transformed into a staff of about 2 meters in length. It was made from some unknown kind of material. The whole staff was as black as ink. I heard that the Bailey sect has an ultimate treasure. Rumor has it that it was the weapon of an ultimate warrior, and was refined by this warrior over many days and nights. It possesses a terrifying destructive ability. Could this be it? Jin Wuji asked. Yes, this is the Staff of Destruction. Bailey Tingyun nodded and gave the staff a light wave. Wang, the black staff trembled slightly and a powerful shock wave spread out from it. Then let me experience attacks from this Staff of Destruction. Jin Wuji revealed a solemn expression. This solemnity was not because of Bailey Tingyun, but because of the Staff of Destruction. Chapter 71, Spirit Weapon. Seeing the appearance of the Staff of Destruction, even Ling Han revealed an expression of utmost seriousness. After a martial artist has reached the spiritual ocean tier, they would be able to use their own origin power to refine weapons, making the attack power of the weapon soar. The higher the cultivation level of the martial artist, the more powerful his weapon would be. For example, the weapon used by a powerful warrior of heaven tier would be able to instantly eliminate a martial artist in deity transformation tier. If I could find the weapon I used in my last life, Cloud Dragon Sword, that'd be great. I'd be invincible in the whole of Rain Country, Ling Han thought, yet quickly laughed in spite of himself. With his current cultivation level, he couldn't even get within 100 meters of Cloud Dragon's sword. If he did, then he'd definitely be directly shattered by the aura of a weapon used by a powerful warrior of heaven tier. But even if I could obtain Cloud Dragon's sword now, I wouldn't use it anyways. Otherwise, training myself in this life would lose its significance. While he had been thinking pensively, Bailey Tingyun and Jin Wuji had began a fierce battle. The Staff of Destruction was indeed very powerful. After pouring origin power into it, a few seals actually lit up on the body of the staff. However, these seals should be covering the whole body of the staff, yet only a mere few had lit up. With the aid of the powerful Staff of Destruction, Bailey Tingyun regained his footing in the battle. But it was still very far from allowing him to gain victory. Even so, many people were still gasping in shock at the power and might of the Staff of Destruction. It truly deserves to be the weapon used by a powerful warrior. I heard that this kind of weapon is also known as spirit weapon. Apparently, it seems to have its own intelligence, and is able to help its user increase his battle prowess. Unfortunately, only powerful warriors that have reached spiritual ocean tier at least are able to refine these kinds of weapons. In the whole De Yuan city, only our De Yuan king has this kind of ability. So, according to you, wouldn't that mean that everyone in the royal house of the De Yuan king could have a spirit weapon of their own? How could that be possible? Firstly, this kind of weapon has to be able to sustain the origin power of a martial artist of spiritual ocean tier. Otherwise, if such powerful origin power is poured into it day and night, it'd very quickly shatter. Moreover, to produce a spirit weapon, a normal weapon would have to be nurtured by a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier for 20 years or more. Just think, when the De Yuan king broke through to the spiritual ocean tier, how old was he? Even if materials were sufficient, how many spirit weapons could the king forge? I see. Yet Ling Han only shook his head in disappointment. Many years ago, this Staff of Destruction may have been very extraordinary, but now, because of extremely severe deterioration, the spiritual seals engraved on it were almost completely destroyed. There was barely 1% of its original power remaining. However, in a place such as De Yuan City, even a ruined spirit weapon could create an extremely large commotion. After all, even the materials it was made of were extremely valuable on their own. The two young men continued exchanging blows, battling fiercely. In terms of power, Jin Wuji possessed an absolute advantage. However, Bailey Tingyun possessed a spirit weapon, even if it was a weakened one. It still allowed him to possess great power and fight with Jin Wuji on equal terms. After the two fighters had exchanged a few hundred blows, Jin Wuji still managed to claim victory due to his more plentiful experience. Meanwhile, after Bailey Tingyun had lost this battle, he could only claim the 4th place in this tournament at the very most. He was extremely dissatisfied about this kind of result, but in the minds of the others, this was already very impressive. After all, Bailey Tingyun was only 18 years old this year. Who would be able to match him in the next tournament, or the one after? However, Jin Wuji managed to win more praise and compliments. He is indeed Jin Wuji. He's really way too powerful. Even producing a spirit weapon is not enough to suppress him. Looks like Li Dongyu is no longer a match for him, but I don't know who is stronger, him or the 4th prince. If it was in the past, I would definitely think that the 4th prince is stronger, but now, I think Jin Wuji also has a very high chance of victory. Me too. After the battle with Bailey Tingyun, Jin Wuji's fame reached a whole new level. He had already surpassed Li Dongyu and was already shoulder to shoulder with the 4th prince's level. This caused Li Dongyu to feel much regret. If he had known this would happen, he would have gone to Huyang Academy 3 years ago. Jin Wuji began to regain his composure. Very soon, he would be issuing a challenge to Li Dongyu, and after that, he would be facing the 4th prince directly. The other competitors also began issuing their own challenges. Ling Han did not stay idle. Because there was a limited half an hour's time for rest, he had to make full use of his time. Otherwise, if 2 of the competitors ahead of him battled for too long, causing him to have to wait impatiently for the half an hour of resting time to pass, he might not have enough time to challenge all the way to the first place. He issued a challenge to the 7th stage master. This was a young man who looked to be about 20 years old. With a long sword strapped to his back and a tall, slender figure, he appeared very confident and at ease. The typical weapons martial artists used were either sabers or swords. But the higher the cultivation level, the weirder and rarer weapons became common as well. For example, umbrellas, pagodas, mirrors, or even pens that, with a single wave, could split rivers and break mountains, possessing terrifying power. I am Lien Tao. Please offer your guidance, Brother Ling, the young man said, clasping his hands in greeting. Please. Ling Han clasped his hands in response. Ha! Lien Tao drew his sword and it was as if the sword and the wielder had become one, flying towards Ling Han. 7th layer of element gathering tier. Ling Han fearlessly brandished his own sword in a parry. Although he was in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, with the added support of the 5 elements origin nuclei, his actual ability could be compared to the 8th layer of element gathering tier. He was no longer weaker than his opponent. Moreover, he still possessed the lone wolf's blood which could further increase his power. In terms of power, he would definitely not lose to any normal person in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Otherwise, he would not have dared to say with such certainty and confidence that he would get the first place in this tournament. Ding, 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 the two of them were soon embroiled in a fierce battle. Their respective swords continuously met each other in a clash, repeatedly producing fiery sparks due to the friction between their blades. The reason why Lien Tao had been able to qualify for the top 10 was because his cultivation level was high enough. However, he could not really be considered as a genius because he had not managed to produce sword chi. The sword arts technique he was using was also only a yellow-grade low-level martial arts technique. Additionally, he had only reached the minor accomplishment level in this sword arts technique. The advantage of a high cultivation level was a stronger power, but now even the power he had gained from his cultivation level was no match for Ling Han. So how could he still possibly win? After only a few moves, he had fallen into an absolute disadvantage. There are 3 black-grade alchemists standing behind this person. Additionally, it's impossible for me to get the first place. Then there isn't much of a difference between the 7th and 8th place anyways. Why don't I do him a favor and forfeit directly? I will help him save some origin power this way. Lien Tao thought. He suddenly retreated a few steps. Withdrawing his sword, he said, I am no match for Brother Ling. I forfeit. He forfeited? Just like that? When Ling Han looked at the knowing smile on his opponent's face, understanding dawned on him. Lien Tao was deliberately doing him a favor. He could not help smiling in spite of himself. If he really had put in full effort, he would be able to instantly defeat his opponent in one move. However, whether he needed it or not, Lien Tao had still done him a favor, so he nodded in acknowledgement at Lien Tao. The two of them exchanged tournament stages. Ling Han did not rest. This battle did not expend much of his origin power, so he immediately issued a challenge to the 6th stage master. The stage master of this stage was Xia Zhongguang, a genius that had just recently emerged in the past 2 years. He was in the 8th layer of element gathering tier. Brother Ling, please. Xia Zhongguang said very politely. Although he was very proud due to his young age and had a very high opinion of himself, the fact that Ling Han had 3 black-grade alchemists behind him still caused him to obediently put away his usually arrogant attitude. Please. Ling Han replied politely. If a person treated you respectfully, so must you be respectful in response. The two of them moved at the same moment. Xia Zhongguang's weapon was a spear and he had also managed to form spear chi. When he waved his 2-meter-long spear in a dance, the might behind his movements was overbearingly powerful. It had fully displayed the unique trait of a spear, which was, the longer it was, the more powerful it was. Chapter 72, Repeatedly Throwing the Match. Ling Han used the shocking electricity sword arts, not displaying any weakness or conceding in any way. Xia Zhongguang was indeed very strong. With one wave of the spear, he actually managed to form 2 flashes of spear qi. See! A round of surprised gasps broke out downstage. 2 flashes of qi, this could be considered a very outstanding accomplishment among the younger generation of De Yuan City, especially since Xia Zhongguang was really too young. He was only 18 years old this year. By the time he had reached the current age of the 4th prince, Li Dongyu and Jin Wuji, how many flashes of qi would he be able to form? 3 flashes? Or even 4 flashes, the real sign of having stepped into the ranks of rulers? 2 flashes, huh? Ling Han smiled softly, and with a wave of his sword, 2 flashes of sword qi similarly appeared. Pooh! Everyone once again choked. They hadn't even recovered from their first shock, and here comes another. Ling Han had also managed to form the 2nd flash of sword qi. Could De Yuan City be about to emerge as a new power? One genius after another appeared in close succession. Xia Zhongguang was also extremely astonished. Indeed, he had formed the first flash of qi through hard work and effort, but the 2nd flash was something he had obtained when he accidentally entered into an ancient tomb, where he came into contact with a strange stone plaque. He had lost consciousness at that point, and saw many memories that were now his own. After he woke up, he discovered that he had somehow formed a 2nd flash of spear qi. Could it be that Ling Han had somehow obtained this kind of chance encounter too? If he hadn't, then he really was too terrifying. To be able to form 2 flashes of sword qi at the young age of 17 years old, he was practically a monster. Xia Zhongguang continued to be on the offensive for a long while, yet did not seem to be making any progress. He could not help feeling a bit dispirited, and when he recalled that Lien Tao before him, he could not help thinking, there are 3 black-grade alchemists standing behind this person, while I am obviously no match for the 4th prince. Then, what difference is there between the 6th and 7th place? Why don't I take this chance to do him a favor then? When his thoughts turned in this direction, he resolutely ceased his attack and said, Brother Ling is indeed extraordinarily strong, I forfeit. Why was there another forfeit? Weren't they obviously locked in a stalemate, with neither fighter having an advantage over the other? Aside from those few who had attended the 4th prince's banquet a few days ago, the rest was very confused. But still, Ling Han had showed that he had formed 2 flashes of sword qi in this battle, and so indeed proved that he was more powerful than Lien Tao. So Lien Tao's forfeit could be claimed as him having foresight. Could it be that Ling Han was actually even more powerful than what he had shown up to now, and that was the reason why Xia Zhongguang had simply forfeited the battle? Ling Han shook his head, smiled and said, Brother Xia is too humble. Let me offer my best wishes that Brother Ling may obtain an even better result. Let us be on closer terms in the future, please. Xia Zhongguang leapt onto the 7th tournament stage. It was at this moment that Jin Wuji too had issued a challenge, the other party being Li Dongyu. There was no suspense about the result. Within a mere 10 moves, Li Dongyu had been defeated by Jin Wuji. The longing he felt to enter into Huyang Academy also intensified with this loss. Holding on to this momentum firmly, Jin Wuji continued on to challenge the 4th prince. Ling Han had no interest in watching the battles of others. After a short rest, he continued on to challenge the 5th stage master. The 5th stage master was Lu Yu. He was also a genius that had only emerged within the last 2 years. Because these 2 big battles were ongoing at the same time, majority of the spectators went over to watch the battle between the 4th prince and Jin Wuji. Only people like Ling Dongxing, Lu Yutong and Li Hao paid attention to Ling Han's battle. Brother Ling, please. Lu Yu was also very polite. It could be argued that no one in the whole of Rain Country dared to ignore the existence of a black-grade alchemist, and there were as many as 3 such alchemists standing behind Ling Han. Please. Ling Han brandished his sword in an elaborate wave. His first move was 2 flashes of sword qi. Since he had already revealed a portion of his true prowess, he did not continue to hide it. Lu Yu could be said to be tied with Xia Zhongguang in terms of prowess. Since Xia Zhongguang was no match for Ling Han, naturally Lu Yu wasn't either. After exchanging a few tens of moves, Lu Yu could not help thinking, there are 3 black great alchemists standing behind this person, and in any case, I wouldn't be able to get the first place, so why not do him a favor? As a result, Lu Yu too very frankly forfeited. Thankfully, most of the spectators' attention had been drawn to the huge battle between the 4th prince and Jin Wuji. Otherwise, there'd definitely be suspicions about this tournament being feigned. Ling Han again rose to a higher ranking, and ahead of him only stood 4 people: Bailey Tingyun, Li Dongyu, Jin Wuji, and Qi Yongyi. Who would have thought this would happen before the tournament? Ling Dongxing could not help growing excited. If Ling Han managed to defeat Bailey Tingyun, he'd gain the right to battle with Jin Wuji and the 4th prince. Getting the first place was no longer a dream. The great battle between Qi Yongyi and Jin Wuji was still continuing. The 2 young geniuses both made a very powerful display. One was using palm techniques while the other was using fist techniques. They have both formed qi, and there were as many as 3 flashes on each side, so they already possessed the preliminary demeanor of a ruler. And it was at this moment that Ling Han issued a challenge to Bailey Tingyun. Ling Dongxing became even more anxious. If Ling Han emerged victorious from this battle, then he'd doubtlessly be able to defeat Li Dongyu and ascend to the 3rd place. Top 3, that was impressive enough. Could he still ask for more? Brother Ling. Bailey Tingyun was also very polite towards Ling Han. He did not even put on any airs as the young sect master of the Bailey sect. He was even friendlier than he had been with the 4th prince. After all, if the 4th prince did not manage to inherit the position of the De Yuan king, then his status could not be compared to even himself, as the 1st prince would definitely do his utmost to suppress him. But Ling Han was different. There were 3 black grade alchemists standing behind him. Please. Please. The 2 fighters respectively spoke a word of invitation. Bailey Tingyun directly drew his staff of destruction and said, Brother Ling is very powerful. If I do not try my best, then that would be the greatest disrespect to Brother Ling. Then let me also experience the might of a spirit weapon, Ling Han said with a smile as he lightly waved the long sword in his hand, producing a soft hum. Take care then. Bailey Tingyun harnessed the black staff and charged in a ferocious attack towards Ling Han. 7 seals lit up in close succession and half a black skull appeared, pouncing towards Ling Han. This black skull contained a sliver of will of a powerful warrior. Initially, it would be able to create an invisible pressure on a martial artist in gushing spring tier and directly shatter the spirit of a martial artist of element gathering tier. However, because too much time had passed, this spirit weapon had also experienced serious deterioration. Its power had long since degraded from how it initially was, and this skull could only produce a limited effect on a martial artist of element gathering tier now. But if it wasn't because for that, Bailey Tingyun wouldn't have been able to wield this spirit weapon with his current strength. Though Ling Han was no longer the powerful warrior of heaven tier he had been in the past, and there only remained a sliver of will of a warrior of heaven tier within him, heaven tier was still heaven tier. Even if it was a mere sliver, it was enough to sweep away all challengers without contention. This black skull was not able to affect him the slightest bit. He used the shocking electricity sword arts. His sword was like a rainbow. Ding, 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 the sword and staff repeatedly clashed, creating friction. 2 flashes of sword chi moved unhindered, and there was no sign of Ling Han falling into a disadvantageous position. Quick, look there. Ling Han is having a great battle with Bailey Tingyun. What, he's actually so powerful. No wonder Xia Zhongguang and the others forfeited so fast previously. They had already known that Ling Han was so powerful. Damn, when did this kind of freak appear? He's just in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, and he's actually powerful to this extent. More and more people were attracted to that battle. They felt that a single pair of eyes was not enough for them. They wanted to watch the clash of the strongest between the 4th prince and Jin Wuji, but they also wanted to watch the battle of the brightest of the younger generation between Ling Han and Bailey Tingyun. Chapter 73, For Flashes of Sword Qi. There were only a rare few that knew that Ling Han had not yet displayed his full abilities, because he had only used 2 flashes of sword qi while his limit was actually 4. And only Ling Han knew that he had not yet stimulated Lone Wolf's blood, which would actually upgrade his battle prowess to yet another level. This was mainly because Ling Han's will was strong enough, so the influence of the Staff of Destruction on the battle was barely visible. This meant that Bailey Tingyun's attacks were mostly dependent on his own power, and he was on a lower level than Li Dongyu, so how could he possibly be a match for Ling Han? In this fierce battle and clash of the young generation, Ling Han was gradually gaining the upper hand. Hey! Even Jin Wuji hadn't had such an easy time fighting him, right? Does that mean that Ling Han is even stronger than Jin Wuji? Someone exclaimed in shock. That can't be. The power behind every one of his attacks is inferior to Jin Wuji's, so how is it possible that he's stronger than Jin Wuji? Someone else immediately retorted. But why did Jin Wuji have such a hard time during his battle, yet Ling Han so easily got the upper hand? None of them knew about the fact that the Staff of Destruction had the ability to suppress the opponent's spirit, so of course they did not understand why Ling Han could easily suppress Bailey Tingyun when his attacks were obviously on a weaker level than Jin Wuji's attacks. They were still perplexed even after much thought. Meanwhile, Bailey Tingyun had started thinking, the few people before me had obviously done Ling Han a favor. If I don't do the same, he may resent me. Moreover, I obviously can't get the first place anyways, so what difference is there between the 4th and 5th place? When his thoughts took this turn, he quickly drew his staff back and retreated. He said, Brother Ling is indeed very powerful. I forfeit. Damn, why was there another forfeit again? The spectators were just starting to get excited from watching the battle. How come this Bailey Tingyun did the same as those before him, giving up just like that? What kind of background did this Ling Han have, causing every opponent of his to do him favors like that? Ling Han stepped onto the 4th tournament stage, and he only had 3 opponents left ahead of him. Although he had expended a bit of energy battling Bailey Tingyun, he could still fight another battle. Ling Han gave a great leap and arrived on the 3rd tournament stage. Congratulations to Brother Ling for overcoming all difficulties to make it this far, Li Dongyu said to Ling Han before his expression grew serious, and he said, however, as a sign of my respect for Brother Ling, I will try my best in this battle. Please. Ling Han drew his sword and displayed a sword move in response. Li Dongyu gave a long hiss and prepared to use his little Tianyuan hands, charging towards Ling Han in attack. Although he was bare-handed, after learning this martial arts technique, once he began circulating origin power, his hands would be like finely forged iron, as firm as rock. Even sharp blades had no hope of causing injury to his hands, or at least the ordinary iron sword Ling Han was wielding had no hope of injuring his hands. Ding, 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 as the blade and the flesh of hand clashed, clanging noises continuously echoed out, and there were fiery sparks flying about from the point of contact between the hand and the blade. Li Dongyu was in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so he exceeded both Bailey Tingyun and even Ling Han in prowess. Thus, after exchanging a few blows, Ling Han could actually feel numbness spreading through the hand he wielded his sword in. However, he had already learnt the Body of Dead Tree ability from the indestructible Heaven Scroll, so this kind of damage did not affect him in the slightest. Ling Han shook his head. Such a clash of brute force would be non-conclusive unless one of the fighters had a power advantage or both fighters were evenly matched. Even if his body was tough and indomitable due to the Body of Dead Tree skill he had learnt and thus avoided damage from the tremors caused by clashing with Li Dongyu, it was still absolutely pointless. He used the shocking electricity sword arts, and his 2 flashes of sword qi continuously danced, instantaneously turning his disadvantageous position back around. But the name of Li Dongyu was not famous from his talking big. He had managed to form 3 flashes of qi, and as his palms flew in an attack, it was obvious that his power was of a terrifying level. He had lost to Qi Yongyi and Jin Wuji previously simply because those two were even stronger than he was. His little Tianyuan hands was also a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique, so Ling Han did not possess an advantage in terms of the grade of martial arts technique. In terms of power, he was weaker than Li Dongyu by a single layer of cultivation level, so faced with Li Dongyu's full power attacks, Ling Han gradually fell into a disadvantage. What's the matter? Technically, Bailey Tingyun should be stronger than Li Dongyu, right? Ling Han had an easy time against Bailey Tingyun, but why is he having such a tough time against Li Dongyu now? Could it be that Bailey Tingyun had not tried his best just now? That's definitely the case. Otherwise, how would the current situation be possible? I really am curious now. What kind of background does this Ling Han have? Why is it that all his previous opponents had deliberately allowed him to win? All of the spectators were puzzled and extremely curious. Meanwhile, Ling Dongxing was frowning deeply. His son had defeated Bailey Tingyun, so he should have been like an irresistible force, continuing his advance to obtain the third place. Yet why was he in a disadvantage now against the weaker Li Dongyu? A hint of a smile appeared on the corners of Ling Han's lips. Looks like he would have to increase his abilities. With a wave of his long sword, 4 flashes of sword chi simultaneously appeared. Pooh! This time, all spectators choked. All of them were completely struck dumb. 4 flashes of sword chi, he actually had 4 flashes of sword chi. One has to understand that possessing 4 flashes of sword chi could be considered as a minor accomplishment. Such a person would deserve the name of a ruler, signifying that he could be invincible among those of a certain cultivation level. A 17-year-old ruler. Ling Dongxing was both astonished and elated. He turned to Lu Yutong and asked, Honor has managed to form 4 flashes of sword chi, did you already know about this? N. Lu Yutong nodded. In truth, Ling Han had already managed to form 4 flashes of sword chi when he had only been in body refining tier. But this guy had not wanted to reveal his true talent and display his full prowess all this while. Thus, every time he revealed a bit more of his power, it was always enough to give a shock. Very good. Ling Dongxing heavily slapped his thigh, excitement filling his face. This stupid brat even kept his old man completely in the dark. See if I won't teach him a good lesson when we get back. Lu Yutong hid a smile. She knew that Ling Dongxing felt only joy now. How could he bear to reprimand Ling Han? No wonder his previous opponents had forfeited. This guy has apparently managed to form 4 flashes of sword chi. He could be named a ruler among those of the same cultivation level already. I had never really imagined that such a genius would actually emerge from within our Dayuan city. That's true. Among the 36 cities of Rain Country, the martial arts level of our Dayuan city has always been below average. But now there actually appeared a genius that has formed 4 flashes of sword chi from within our midst. He is indeed a source of pride for our city. When these 4 flashes of sword chi appeared, it generated a shock that spread through the whole area. Even the clash of the titans between the 4th prince and Jin Wuji had paled in comparison as more and more people were drawn over, fighting to get a look at the indomitable might of 4 flashes of sword chi. Li Dongyu's face was full of bitterness. He had worked so hard on his cultivation these 3 years. Originally, he had thought that he would be able to get the first place in the Dayuan tournament this time. But he never imagined that his dreams would be shattered by the 4th prince, causing him to realize that he had fallen behind those in his age range. And now, in a generation younger than his own, there actually appeared a freak that had successfully formed 4 flashes of sword chi, causing his confidence to suffer a severe blow. However, he immediately pulled himself together. As long as he managed to enroll into Huyang Academy, then his prowess would definitely be able to advance by leaps and bounds, and he'd be able to catch up to the 4th prince and Jin Wuji. This person has a close relationship with 3 black-grade alchemists. Moreover, he's also managed to form 4 flashes of sword chi. Why don't I readily forfeit and do him a favor? Li Dongyu thought. The others have all done him favors, so if I don't, it might not look good. When he thought this, he immediately retreated, clasped his hands and said, Brother Ling is indeed a genius to be able to form 4 flashes of sword chi at the mere age of 17. I am really deeply impressed by your achievements. There is no need to continue the battle, I forfeit. Damn! All of the spectators were depressed. This was the first time that they had seen a genius with 4 flashes of sword chi, and you actually won't fight for a bit longer, letting them enjoy watching to the fullest. Why did you forfeit so soon? Chapter 74, The Next Battle. Still, Li Dongyu forfeiting was only to be expected. After all, there had been many previous fighters who had forfeited even without any obvious signs of impending loss, so everyone was somewhat prepared that this kind of thing would happen again. Additionally, Ling Han could form 4 flashes of sword chi, which granted him invincibility amongst those of the same cultivation level, even if his cultivation level was still a bit low. Thank you for the match, Ling Han said, clasping his hands in a polite gesture. Yet he couldn't help pondering, would all his opponents let him win all the way to the first place? As the battle between Ling Han and Li Dongyu's battle had concluded, everyone turned their attention back to the duel between the 4th prince and Jin Wuji. Both of them were young geniuses who were studying at Huyang Academy, so their respective ability was quite even. There wasn't really too big of a gap in power between the two of them. But when Qi Yongyi started to use the Son of Heaven fist technique, Jin Wuji immediately fell into a disadvantage. When the Son of Heaven appears, all shall bow. This was a kind of aura domination, and only a prince like Qi Yongyi would be able to cultivate this technique. Even if Jin Wuji learnt the same technique, it would still be useless. He did not possess the royal heritage necessary to tap into its potential. Rumor has it that stealing the divine weapon of a nation would allow the manipulation of that nation's power. It would not only speed up the rate of cultivation, but could also be used against one's enemies, increasing your own battle prowess. Looks like the rumors aren't false. Just a mere prince, and he possesses such power, Ling Han nodded to himself. The power of the nation is an ability that is equivalent to 4 flashes of sword chi. According to the slang of Rain Country, this would be the standard of a ruler. If the Deyuan king were to use this fist technique, he'd probably be able to reach approximately the level of 7 flashes of chi since he is a real noble lord. For the true ruler of the nation, he'd probably have the power equivalent to 10 flashes of chi, at the level of completion. However, Qi is only the first step in martial arts. One still has to go through Ray before being able to reach the highest level, heart. Thus, cultivation ultimately still depends on the effort of the individual martial artist, Ling Han thought, yet he had to admit to be able to manipulate and make use of the power of a nation at the low level of element gathering tier and increase his individual battle prowess to a new level was already impressive enough a feat, even if it was just the tiniest part. Based on Qi Yongye's current ability, he is practically half a foot into gushing spring tier. Perhaps my little female attendant would be no match for him either. After all, she has just formed the 2nd flash of sword chi, so she still has no way to rival the might of a ruler that he possesses. If it was me, I'd definitely need to use Lone Wolf's blood to upgrade my power to the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Otherwise, would need to depend on the self-recovery ability of the indestructible Heaven Scroll and slowly wear him down. With the body of dead tree ability that I have now, my defenses are not something that a martial artist in element gathering tier can break through. I had better stick to using Lone Wolf's blood. Indestructible Heaven Scroll is my real trump card. I should avoid using it if I can. While he had been thinking pensively, the battle between Qi Yongyi and Jin Wuji was nearing its conclusion. The Son of Heaven fist technique granted Qi Yongyi the battle prowess of a ruler and allowed him to completely dominate Jin Wuji. As long as Jin Wuji himself had not yet formed 4 flashes of Qi, he couldn't possibly be a match for Qi Yongyi. There's nothing to be done. Qi Yongyi had the advantage of a good, noble background, and this was something even Lu Yutong could not compare to. Pung! By the time Qi Yongyi threw his 11th punch, Jin Wuji could no longer resist and was directly flung away. With an "AO," he spat out 4 consecutive mouthfuls of blood, half kneeling on the floor, no longer able to continue the battle. "I have lost," Jin Wuji declared with slight reluctance. Strictly speaking, he had not lost because he was weaker, or because he was less talented. Instead, he had lost because his opponent had a better background than him. How could he not become depressed at this reality? "Thank you for the match." Qi Yongyi clasped his hands politely in response. Although his victory was due to the Son of Heaven fist technique, it could have been possible only if he had learned it successfully. There were so many princes and imperial princes in Rain Country, but how many had actually successfully learned the technique? The name of genius, he bore it without guilt. However, when the two of them saw that Ling Han had actually arrived on the 3rd tournament stage, they could not help being shocked. Previously, they had been too absorbed in their own battle, and so had not seen Ling Han's fight with Bailey Tingyun and Li Dongyu. Naturally, they had no idea that Ling Han was powerful to this extent, or even of the fact that he had formed 4 flashes of sword chi. The other stage masters had wanted to continue watching the match, but since the duel between the 2 greatest young rulers had concluded, they began to issue their own challenges to aim for a better placement. Doing favors for Ling Han was one thing, but if they could manage to get a better rank, who wouldn't want to try? Ling Han waited quietly. After half an hour, he would challenge Jin Wuji. Currently, the space in his dantian was still too small, and with the high-powered rotation of the 5 elements origin nuclei, his reserves of origin power got expended too quickly. After a fierce battle, he had to take alchemical pills to assist his recovery, thus this half an hour's time was also very important to him. Very soon, half an hour had passed and Ling Han leaped onto the 2nd tournament stage to challenge this martial artist that was ranked 2nd in this tournament. This fell into the expectations of all the spectators and they all stared with their eyes open wide, unwilling to miss a single moment. After all, this was the first genius in the whole of De Yuan City who has managed to form 4 flashes of qi. Jin Wuji had a slightly awkward expression on his face. A few days ago, he was tricked by Ling Han, leading to his public embarrassment. But when he recalled that there were 3 black-grade alchemists behind Ling Han, even if he did not abandon the thoughts of revenge, most likely those seniors of his in the Jin clan would force him to give up such a foolish venture anyway. After all, the very worst group of people you could offend in this world would be alchemists. However, such a great humiliation, how could he simply let it go just like that? "Very well, you were the one who challenged me, so I can take advantage of this opportunity to teach you a lesson. As long as I don't deal you any permanent injury, no one will be able to say anything. This is, after all, a martial arts tournament." Jin Wuji thought, his gaze immediately turning sharp. "Brother Ling, please offer your guidance." He clapped his palms together and his 2 hands immediately dazzled brightly like gold. This was Jin Yang Palms, a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique. Ling Han waved his sword in a sword move and said, "Please." Whoosh, Jin Wuji immediately began a powerful offense. As his palms flew in attack, a resplendent light shone. Ling Han gave a wave of his sword, and 4 flashes of sword chi immediately appeared. Since he had already revealed his abilities, then he naturally had no intention to hide his prowess any longer. "What, 4 flashes of sword chi?" Jin Wuji exclaimed in astonishment, his face twitching involuntarily in his shock. 4 flashes of sword chi, that was a ruler of those in the same cultivation level. Even in the imperial city, there were only a rare few who have reached the extraordinary height of possessing 4 flashes of qi, and all of them were the absolute powerhouses of the older generation. How could Jin Wuji not be extremely shocked? But he immediately realized that though there were some that were gasping and exclaiming in admiration, and some who were waving their arms and tripping over their feet in excitement, there wasn't a single expression of surprise amongst the spectators. Hey, hey, hey. This was 4 flashes of sword chi, do you guys not see this? Could it be that it was him who had seen wrongly? Jin Wuji could not help the doubts rising in his heart. After all, just how rare was achieving 4 flashes of sword chi? Even if it had appeared in the imperial city, it would be enough to create a giant commotion. Yet the people here actually appeared so calm, of course he would be confused. Naturally, he had no idea that these spectators had already experienced the same shock as he just now, so of course, there would be no such scenes as people watching wide-eyed and flabbergasted, gaping in shock and wonder. Thankfully, there was one person who gave him face and revealed an extremely shocked expression, and that, of course, was none other than Qi Yongyi. His mouth was partially open in shock, gaping at Ling Han with a completely dumbfounded expression, a faint twitch at the corners of his lips. After Jin Wuji recovered from his shock, he still persisted in his attack. So what if Ling Han had 4 flashes of sword chi? Ling Han's cultivation level was still too low after all. He would definitely not forfeit just because he had been surprised by the revelation of Ling Han's 4 flashes of sword chi. The two fighters were soon engaged in a fierce battle. Chapter 75, Battle for the Top. Jin Wuji possessed the typical power of someone at the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and yellow-grade high-level martial arts techniques were also the most powerful techniques that could be learnt within this cultivation level. Moreover, he had also formed 2 flashes of chi, so among martial artists of element gathering tier, he was someone that was definitely close to the rank of ruler. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. 4 flashes of sword chi equated being a ruler of his cultivation level. Jin Wuji felt as if he was facing Qi Yongyi again. The only difference was that Qi Yongyi was stronger in terms of power. In other areas, Ling Han was not inferior in any way to Qi Yongyi. In fact, in terms of reaction speed and ability, he was even better than Qi Yongyi. Was this really a 17-year-old young man? Talent was indeed a terrifying thing. It wasn't until this moment that Jin Wuji finally abandoned all thoughts of vengeance. He even decided to pay a visit to Ling Han with his younger brother in tow to apologize, and dissolve the bad feelings between them once and for all. It was because Ling Han would definitely have horrifyingly high achievements in the future, and it was practically guaranteed that he would become someone that exceeded Jin Wuji. Since there was no way he could eliminate this kind of rival, then the best idea was to develop an affable relationship with the former. He could definitely not afford to make an enemy of someone of his caliber. The battle continued on and on. This time, aside from using Lone Wolf's blood and indestructible Heaven Scroll, Ling Han had used all the abilities he had on hand, allowing him to enjoy the battle to the fullest. Unfortunately, the 5 elements origin nuclei expended origin power at a very rapid pace, which would not allow him to persist for too long. It'd be great if he managed to obtain the Dark Moon Grass. It would help to expand the space in his dantian by many times. After battling for more than 100 moves, the two of them still maintained a very evenly matched balance. Jin Wuji could not help thinking, there are 3 black-grade alchemists behind this guy, and anyways, I won't be. Similarly with those before him, he chose to deliberately throw the match and do a favor for Ling Han. This way, when he brought his brother to pay Ling Han a visit and apologize, it'd probably be easier to dissolve the remaining bad feelings between them. Brother Ling is indeed brilliant in martial arts. I forfeit. He swiftly retreated backwards, clasped his hands together and declared his forfeit. Ling Han's later momentum was already a bit lacking, and he was about to start circulating Lone Wolf's blood to defeat his opponent instantaneously. He had never imagined that Jin Wuji would actually forfeit of his own volition. Seeing the friendly signal issued by his opponent, he nodded in response and said, "Thank you for the match. Anyone can make mistakes, so it'd be wise to forgive them if it was possible." Moreover, in the first place, the conflict between himself and Jin Wuji wasn't an irresolvable feud that could not be forgiven. Sure enough, another forfeit. Could it be that among the martial arts techniques that Ling Han has learned there is one specifically geared to make his opponent forfeit? Ha ha ha, if you were as talented as Ling Han and have also formed 4 flashes of sword chi, I could also declare forfeit in front of you. How could 4 flashes of sword chi be so easily formed? The spectators felt both astonished because Ling Han actually advanced another step further and numbed as they thought that this was only a natural course of events. After all, this scene had already played many times. Thankfully, Ling Han only had one last opponent remaining, and even if Qi Yongyi forfeited too, they only needed to experience a shock one last time. Good. Ling Dongxing gripped his hands into tight fists, slightly numb with excitement. His son was able to achieve such a feat, what else could he ask for? He recalled that when his son had declared that he would obtain the first place in the tournament 2 months ago, he felt absolutely incredulous. But what about now? The first place was so close at hand. Even if he knew that Qi Yongyi was very powerful and the Son of Heaven fist technique was equivalent to 4 flashes of sword qi as well as that his cultivation level was far above Ling Han's own, he still could not help the wild hope bursting to life within him. What if his son really managed to do the impossible? First place. Since he had already come so far, then he should definitely aim for the first place. If he didn't even issue a challenge, he would definitely regret it for the rest of his life. The other stage masters were all engaged in battle, but there were already few spectators who were still watching these battles. Everyone was waiting with bated breath for Ling Han to recover and the last battle to take place. Was it Ling Han who would be able to create another miracle, and become the greatest dark horse in this De Yuan tournament? Or would it be the 4th prince that would have the last laugh, completely leaving behind the title of 2nd place? Ling Han had more than enough time to rest and recover as there was no rule that specified that he had to issue a challenge after resting for half an hour. He would, of course, recover to his best condition before proceeding to challenge Qi Yongyi. Although even after a long time, Ling Han did not make any move to issue a challenge, none of the spectators rushed him into doing so, for they knew very well that only if Ling Han managed to recover to his best condition could he and the 4th prince offer the most wonderful, brilliant battle. After another hour passed, Ling Han finally stood. Here it comes. Here it comes. All of the spectators thought, immediately growing excited. 4th prince, let us battle. Ling Han jumped up onto the first tournament stage and issued a challenge to Qi Yongyi. Brother Ling, please. Qi Yongyi smiled, though he felt an urge to start cursing. After all the people before him had thrown their matches because there were 3 black-grade alchemists standing behind Ling Han. Should he throw his match or not? If he threw the match, then what? The first place of this De Yuan tournament was something that he had coveted for 3 years, and the Dark Moon grass could help him to immediately step into Gushing Spring tier, which would save him 2 or 3 years' time of cultivation at the very least. But if he didn't, then what? The others have all thrown their matches, and you don't. Wasn't this not giving face to Ling Han? It'd be fine if it was anyone else, but Qi Yongyi had a grand ambition. He was someone who would become a famous lord, and a famous lord definitely should respect the wise and recruit talents from everywhere and anywhere. Especially with a genius like Ling Han, to enter a conflict with him was naturally something very bad. So how could Qi Yongyi not be stuck in a dilemma? Finally, Qi Yongyi still decided to do his best. If worst comes to worst, after he had commissioned the concoction of alchemical pills from the Dark Moon grass, he'd give one to Ling Han. Please. Ling Han waved his sword, and 4 flashes of sword qi appeared. Qi Yongyi gave a loud shout and already started using the Son of Heaven fist technique. His movements were very large, as if a single punch would be able to shatter everything, even if it was a mountain that appeared in his way. What was even more terrifying was the fact that there were actually 3 layers of qi wrapped around his fists. Although the power of the nation could not simply be added onto it in a sum, but no matter how it was, its strength was still equivalent to 4 flashes of sword qi. All of the spectators gasped in shock. So it turned out that Qi Yongyi had not displayed his full abilities previously, and this was the true extent of the 4th prince's power. So powerful, how could Ling Han win against this? Even if his opponent was someone close to Gushing Spring tier and had not yet formed qi, he wouldn't be able to match Qi Yongyi either. Pung! 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 After repeated blows from heavy fists, Ling Han fell into a continuous retreat. However, even if he withstood this kind of attack, there was absolutely no harm done to his body. Body of dead tree. Ling Han was a bit stunned. If he didn't start bleeding, how was he supposed to circulate Lone Wolf's blood? He was about to faint. So it turned out that defenses that were too strong might not necessarily be a good thing, as it actually conflicted directly with him using Lone Wolf's blood. He shouted loudly, and bit down on his tongue harshly. Immediately, a bitter taste flooded the inside of his mouth. He had finally started bleeding. Hong, the 4-5 element's origin nuclei in his body immediately began rotating even faster, suddenly allowing his power to be raised to a new level. 9th layer of element gathering tier. The higher the cultivation level, the smaller the power upgrade from Lone Wolf's blood. However, this was already enough. Ling Han brandished his iron sword, using the shocking electricity sword arts to its full extent. Ding, 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 peng, 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 peng. The two fighters were embroiled in a fierce clash as they displayed their respective prowess as much as they liked. Gods, so it turns out that element gathering tier could actually be this powerful. I'm also in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, but if I were the one fighting, I'd probably be defeated within 3 moves. If you constantly compare yourself to others, you will only make yourself angry. A new generation is soon going to replace the old generation. We're all old already. This era belongs to the young generation. Quite a number of the clan heads from Grey Cloud Town were sighing tiredly. Some of them were 30 years old, 40 years old, or even 50 years old, and they were all stuck on the cultivation level of 9th layer of element gathering tier. Because they could not manage to break through even after a very long time, they improved their own origin power to its limits with constant practice, but when facing these two young talents, they could only sigh at their own inferiority. Chapter 76, First Place. Qi Yongyi was overwhelmed with shock. Initially, he had thought that he could disregard all the so-called geniuses in this De Yuan tournament. Even if he didn't do his best, he'd still be able to easily get the first place. Things had gone according to his plan, at least they had, until he encountered the dark horse named Ling Han. Too strong. This time, he had really tried his best, yet there still was no sign of him having the upper hand. How could he not be extremely astonished at this? Ling Han was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, and he was already powerful to this extent. Then when he reached the 7th layer and officially stepped into the late stage of element gathering tier, how powerful would he get? He couldn't be called a genius anymore. He was a monster. Even Feng Yan hadn't been as powerful as this 3 years ago, right? Qi Yongyi involuntarily thought. In the younger generation of De Yuan City, Qi Yongyi was not the most talented one. That honor belonged to Feng Yan. 3 years ago, Feng Yan, with a cultivation level of the 9th layer of element gathering tier, ascended to the first place with an absolute dominance over Qi Yongyi. And in the tournament before that, Feng Yan, with a cultivation level of the 4th layer of element gathering tier, managed to defeat many opponents in the 9th layer of element gathering tier to obtain the first place. Even after entering Huyang Academy, where geniuses of all kinds and varieties were gathered, the brilliance of Feng Yan did not decrease in the slightest. Last year, he had already broken through to Gushing Spring tier and won a place among the top 10 strongest elites of the academy. Qi Yongyi could only manage to admire and look up to this level of achievement. Now, Qi Yongyi finally managed to see another monster who could match Feng Yan, or was perhaps even more talented than the latter was. Because, when Feng Yan had been in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, those of his opponents who were in the 9th layer were nowhere as strong as Qi Yongyi was currently. As he fiercely battled, Qi Yongyi thought that since Ling Han was so monstrously talented, he might as well help the latter establish a grand reputation and allow him to enter Huyang Academy with a glory that did not pale in comparison with Feng Yan. And by then, Feng Yan would definitely feel pressure, wouldn't he? Fine, then he will give face to Ling Han and do him a favor. Of course, if it wasn't for the fact that Ling Han was powerful enough, Qi Yongyi would definitely not deign to do this favor for Ling Han. But since Ling Han has now displayed power strong enough to match him, he'd be happy to do him this favor at such little cost to himself. After all, there was no idea what kind of heights this monster would reach in the future. He also had 3 black great alchemists as his support, so it wasn't a far-off dream for him to surpass Feng Yan in power. This was a character deserving of his investment. This kind of stake, he was willing to gamble on it. Brother Ling is indeed exceptional. I forfeit this battle. Qi Yongyi forfeited of his own volition. Ling Han gave a short laugh and said, this battle could only be considered a draw. His strengths were the body of dead tree ability, defenses, and a terrifyingly rapid recovery speed, while his weakness lay in the fact that the 5-element origin nuclei exhausted his reserves of origin power too quickly. Thus, he truly could not say for sure that he could defeat Qi Yongyi, thus a draw was the fairest judgment of their battle. Qi Yongyi gave a shake of his head and said, you're only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, and you're already able to match me. If I still insist on saying this was a draw, then my skin is really too thick. After speaking, he leaped onto the 2nd tournament stage voluntarily. Ling Han had reached the top. A clamor of shocked gasps and exclamations could be heard downstage. Although such a conclusion was not really that unpredictable, when they actually heard the 4th prince declare his own forfeit, there was still quite a number of spectators who felt that it was all unreal. 6 years ago, the most talented genius in the Yuan city of the time had overcome all the difficulties in his way and courageously won the 1st place in the tournament with a mere cultivation level of the 4th layer of element gathering tier, and now, 6 years later, a similar giant dark horse once again appeared. Was the field of martial arts in the Yuan city starting to flourish? Ling Han made no pretense of modesty, because he truly did need the prize rewarded to the 1st place winner of this tournament. Thus, he only raised his clasped hands in Qi Yongyi's direction, signifying that he would remember this favor, which he would repay tenfold in the future. At this point, there was only about half an hour left before sunset, and there remained only one tournament stage that was still battling. If the stage master won, then the heavy curtain would finally be drawn on this De Yuan tournament. If he did not, then there would have to be a bit more waiting before the end. However, there were no more surprises. Half an hour later, the rankings of the top 10 strongest was finally confirmed. 1st place, Ling Han. He really got the 1st place. He really got the 1st place. Ling Dongxing kept mumbling. Excitement and disbelief were all over his face. His son, once a publicly acknowledged trash, actually would have the day when he would become the 1st place winner in the De Yuan tournament. He finally let out a bout of uncontrollable laughter, overwhelmed with joy. The top 10 martial artists all descended from their respective tournament stages. After this, there would be a banquet held at the royal house of the De Yuan king to celebrate the success of the top 50 participants. Congratulations, Brother Ling. Congratulations. Qi Yongyi and the others all gathered around Ling Han to offer their congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Ling Han clasped his hands politely in response. Later we definitely have to get ourselves thoroughly drunk. But of course. Let's go, let's go. Only the top 50 participants could attend the banquet. Their friends and family were not allowed to accompany them, so whether it was Ling Dongxing or Lu Yutong, neither could accompany Ling Han to the banquet. Very soon, Ling Han and the others arrived at the royal house of the De Yuan king. This was a colossal residence, at least 10 times bigger than the residence of the 4th prince. The embellishments and decorations within were all extremely extravagant and luxurious, causing quite a few young men who had come from some smaller towns to look around with gaping mouths, as if they were village boys who had managed to enter the imperial palace. The host of this banquet was the De Yuan king, and later on, he would be directly presenting the top 10 with their respective prizes. However, the De Yuan king did not stay for too long. He was a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier, so he needed not put on any airs at all. He only needed to take a seat and he would naturally exude a terrifying aura, causing all the others to feel a kind of pressure. After he left, the atmosphere finally became lively. All of them were young people, so very quickly, they found similar topics of conversation. Soon, they would all be heading to Huyang Academy, so naturally they all wanted to make more friends. That way, they would be able to look after each other at the academy. However, Ling Han was a bit agitated. He was waiting very impatiently for the presentation of the Dark Moon Grass, a treasure that even powerful warriors of Heaven Tier would feel envy over. As long as it had not entered his pocket yet, there was no way for him to set his mind at ease. When he thought about it, it was actually quite funny for him to become this impatient with his temperament. After waiting for 2 hours, this banquet finally ended, and the prizes for the top 10 were all presented to their winners, contained in small boxes. Ling Han opened his box and took a look. Inside lay a herb that was about a foot long. Each of the leaves were crescent-shaped, and their color resembled darkened moonlight. It was indeed the Dark Moon Grass. Ling Han let out a breath in relief. He was just about to take his leave, but Qi Yongyi and the others all came over to make small talk with him, so he couldn't leave just yet. It wasn't until about midnight that the guests finally departed, and Ling Han could finally return to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. The first thing he did was begin preparation to concoct an alchemical pill. Although the spatial pill was something that even powerful warriors of Heaven Tier would feel envious over, it could still be taken by martial artists of Element Gathering Tier, so strictly speaking, it was only a yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pill. Ling Han of course was able to concoct it. He had already long since prepared all the other ingredients necessary. The only thing missing was the main ingredient, Dark Moon Grass. Since everything was ready now, he immediately began to concoct the pill. Now that he was in Element Gathering Tier, concoction of a yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pill was naturally a piece of cake. After only half an hour, he had successfully concocted the spatial pill. Unfortunately, there was only one. Without any hesitation, he immediately swallowed the spatial pill. He promptly sat down and waited quietly for the pill to take effect. Very quickly, there occurred a tremendous change within his body. It was as if his dantian had become an ocean where raging waves were surging. Each time the waves crashed, the space within his dantian would enlarge by a little bit. Chapter 77, 100 times. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. The space within Ling Han's dantian continuously enlarged at a shockingly rapid pace. He felt as if his body was about to burst, but in truth, the dantian was a small world. Even if it became larger than this whole planet, no physical changes would appear on him. Ling Han, with the help of the medicinal effects from the spatial pill, stimulated the continued expansion of his dantian. At this point, every bit of increase could only be beneficial. 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. Ling Han was overwhelmed with astonishment and joy, for there was still a large amount of medicinal effects that had not yet been expended. So to what extent would this allow his dantian to expand? But when he thought longer about it, this was only normal. This was an alchemical pill that would cause even powerful warriors of Heaven Tier to be moved, and now it was actually taken by him, a lowly martial artist of Element Gathering Tier, so how awesome would the effects be? Unfortunately, the people now actually don't recognize the kind of priceless treasure that was the Dark Moon Grass, and extravagantly use it to break through to Gushing Spring Tier. What a waste. Unfortunately, a martial artist could only take a single spatial pill once in his lifetime. If he took another, there would be no effects at all. If it had not been for this, Ling Han believed he would be able to get his hands on more Dark Moon Grass. However, on the other hand, for most people, the spatial pill was not very valuable because rarely would they battle until the point that their origin power was completely exhausted. The increase of space within the dantian only improved the martial artist's ability to battle longer. There was no change in the amount of power behind each attack. But for a minority of geniuses, this was an extremely valuable item, as they would often battle until the point where they had no way out. So the larger the space within their dantian, the longer they would be able to continue battling, and on many occasions, this would be a lifesaver for them. Ling Han was of course even more pleased. He possessed the 5-element origin nuclei, and previously, the space within his dantian was really too tiny. There was completely too little origin power for his use. 80 times, 90 times, 100 times, and finally, all the medicinal effects of the spatial pill were exhausted. Ling Han finally opened his eyes. Expanded by 100 times. If this spatial pill was swallowed by a powerful warrior of heaven tier, the space within the dantian would only expand by 1%. However, even this single percent would be larger by 100 times than his own expansion of 100 times. There was absolutely no comparison between the two. It was not because the spatial pill was not awesome enough, but because his current cultivation level was really too low. However, with every future increase in his cultivation level, the degree of expansion of the space within his dantian would also be much higher than others, though it would become gradually less and less, until the point where it would only be an expansion by 1% when he reached heaven tier. As a result, there was no loss in him taking the pill so early on. Instead, the earlier he took it, the earlier he could make use of it. The benefits of the spatial pill could last from element gathering tier all the way to heaven tier, or even until shattering void tier in future. He did not immediately stand up. Instead, he stimulated the 5 elements mixed chaos lotus to continuously absorb spiritual chi, which would be transformed into his own origin power within his dantian, building up his reserves. Though the space within his dantian was now extremely large, the 5 elements mixed chaos lotus was too mighty, and together with the 5 elements heaven-grade skill, absorbing and refining spiritual chi was done at an excessively rapid pace. Only one night had passed, yet he had managed to fill the colossal space within his dantian completely. This also meant that in the future, if he battled to the point of exhaustion, he would require at least one night to recover to his prime condition if he did not take any alchemical pills to accelerate his recovery. Although he had not slept at all the night before, Ling Han still felt very energetic. After reaching element gathering tier, cultivation would be able to replace sleep to a limited extent. Moreover, he had only stayed awake for a single night, so it really wasn't a big deal. "Honor, when do you plan to return to Grey Cloud Town?" Ling Dongxing asked him when he arrived at the external rooms to eat. Ling Han considered for a moment, and said, "There is quite a number of people who have asked me to share a meal with them, and I can't really make excuses, so maybe after another 3 or 4 days." "Very well, then you stay here for a few more days while I return first and prepare a celebratory feast for you," Ling Dongxing said, filled with excitement. He couldn't wait to let all the townspeople know that Ling Han had won the first place in this De Yuan tournament. "All right, take care on your journey, father," Ling Han said with a smile. Ling Dongxing nodded. He did not worry about Ling Han, because his son's prowess was already above his own, so even if he stayed behind, he couldn't protect Ling Han anyways. Moreover, he was still the clan head, and after being absent for so long, he had to return as soon as possible to take charge of things back home. After breakfast, Ling Dongxing set out to return to Grey Cloud Town while Ling Han was dragged off by Qi Yongyi and the others to enjoy a meal here and have fun there. Because these people had all thrown their matches appropriately for him in the tournament, this was a favor, so Ling Han naturally could not be ungrateful. On the second day, Qi Yongyi invited Ling Han to have fun at the wrestling ring. What was so fun about the wrestling ring? Ling Han didn't understand, but could not resist Qi Yongyi's enthusiasm and so was dragged along by the latter there. It was also the place where the De Yuan tournament had been held a few days ago. At this moment, all the tournament stages had been dismantled, and there was only a single battle ongoing in such a wide area. 5 wrestlers were currently being surrounded in an attack by 13 demonic beasts. The battle was fierce and the scene was bloody, whereas the spectators that were watching kept releasing shouts of excitement. They are all prisoners awaiting their execution. Though the battles here are extremely dangerous, if they manage to win 10 times in a row, they would be pardoned and regain their freedom, Qi Yongyi explained. Ling Han nodded. Majority of empires had this kind of system. After prisoners were sentenced to death, they could choose to enter a battle to the death in the wrestling ring and win for themselves the chance to continue living. Of course, majority of them died in their battles. The number of people who managed to win their own freedom could be counted on the fingers of a single hand. Good. All of the spectators shouted suddenly, because one of the prisoners had made a mistake and 3 demonic beasts had worked together and ripped off his arms. The agony caused him to continuously scream in pain, but his screams did not last too long, because soon after, his throat was torn out and his flesh was divided amongst the starving demonic beasts. The spectators here have all come for this kind of death and this kind of bloody scenes. Seeing such a scene, some crazy woman even tore apart her shirt and shrieked in excitement, her breasts exposed and trembling in her emotional high. The remaining 4 did not show any sign of panic. Obviously, they have experienced such a thing many times, so they continued to rely on each other and only concentrated on the enemies right in front of them. Gambling is allowed here. Is Brother Ling interested? Qi Yongyi turned to him and asked. Ling Han shook his head in refusal. He had never had a liking for this kind of thing that used the lives of others for entertainment purposes. So Brother Ling does not like this kind of battles. To be honest, neither do I. But the battle after this would definitely be very exciting, Qi Yongyi said mysteriously. An elite of gushing spring tear who's a rapist. Who knows how many women have been ruined by his hand. But he is indeed very powerful, he has not died no matter what was done to him. Today, it would be his 1000th battle, and if he wins it, that'd be 1,000 wins for him. If he wins again, there would be no choice but to set him free. A prisoner of body refining tier would be set free after winning 10 times in a row. For element gathering tier, the condition was 100 wins, while for gushing spring tier, the condition was 1,000 wins. A spark of killing intent involuntarily flashed through Ling Han's eyes. Out of the types of people he hated the most, depraved lechers were in the top 3. Such scum should be directly killed without hesitation. There was no need to give them any sliver of a chance. Today, many of the spectators have come to watch this depraved lecher receive his just punishment. Qi Yongyi said, and for this reason, our royal house of the De Yuan King has even assigned an elite to battle with him. There is absolutely no way we would allow him to avoid getting his just deserts. While they had been speaking, the battle had neared its conclusion. Surrounded and attacked by more than 10 demonic beasts, after 7 demonic beasts died, the 4 prisoners were mauled to death by the remaining beasts one by one, causing the spectators watching to cheer. Everyone, before the climax event on our agenda today, we would like to invite all of you to enjoy a little program. A host entered into the ring, raised his hand, and 2 iron fences on either side of the ring were raised. From behind both iron fences, an iron cage was respectively pushed out. One of the cages contained an extremely strong-looking mature wild wolf, while the other cage actually contained a little girl that could only be 5 or 6 years old at most. Ling Han suddenly stood, flames of rage bursting into life within him. Chapter 78, Wild Girl. Everyone, a team of martial artists entered the 7 Wind Mountains on a hunt a few days ago, and in the den of a fierce tiger, discovered this little girl. The strangest thing was, this little girl not only was not devoured by the fierce tiger, but had even been living with it for quite a few years. She should have been abandoned as an infant in the wild, and was brought back by the tiger to its den. The host introduced the little girl's background, pointing at her. She might look small, but she is exceptionally strong. She's also very violent, does not know how to speak, and nor does she know how to walk on 2 legs. Her behavior is every bit like that of a wild beast. And now, let us all watch her performance in a battle with this wild wolf. All the spectators turned their attention to the little girl. The girl had a head of unkempt hair and her whole body was filthy, covered with dust and dirt. Overall, she had a very bedraggled appearance and a very thin figure. Compared against that wild wolf, it was practically like comparing an infant with an adult. How was she supposed to battle against an opponent like that? The only end result would be being killed without mercy. Hung. Qi Yongyi had also risen to his feet, a displeased expression on his face. This was too much, to actually use such a small child to entertain the audience. They were completely without any conscience. Xiao, Ling Han jumped into the wrestling ring, and said, "Release this child." Hey, hey, hey. Don't you know the rules? This is the property of the De Yuan King, how dare you come here to make trouble? The host was at first stunned, before becoming extremely angry. But soon after, he was again stunned, and pointing at Ling Han, he exclaimed, "You're the champion of this year's De Yuan tournament." After he managed to recognize Ling Han, he dared not be too rash and explained, "Young Master Ling, this is the rule of the wrestling ring. Those who enter the wrestling ring can only battle. There is no difference between male or female, old or young. Then let me ask you, has she willingly entered the battles in the wrestling ring? Or, what crime has she committed that she has no choice but to battle?" Ling Han asked. This, the host was instantly lost for words. In this world where only the strong would be respected, a wild girl would of course not engender anyone's attention. So what if she was sent to battle in the wrestling ring? Who would care? Who would mind? With this question from Ling Han, the host had no idea how he was supposed to answer. Set her free. Qi Yongyi had also leaped into the ring, and coldly commanded the host. Yes, fourth prince. The host hurriedly assented. This was a man who may very possibly inherit the position of the De Yuan King. Naturally, no one would dare to disregard the words of Qi Yongyi. Of course, he dared not release any prisoners even if it was the command of the fourth prince. However, even if she was released, this wild girl would at most not have any identification papers, and could be taken by anyone as a slave. Even if she was released, it wasn't a big deal. He ordered for the cage to be unlocked, and the little girl immediately pounced out like a cheetah. She was extremely strong, and the impact from her pouncing actually knocked down one of the workers in body refining tier. She had completely taken herself to be a wild beast. His small mouth opened, revealing 2 pairs of eerie, snow-white teeth, aiming a bite at that man's throat. This was completely the attack style of a fierce tiger, biting down on the throat to cut off the air supply of its prey. Ling Han quickly acted. He took hold of the little girl's neck, but the little girl instantly swiped her claws at Ling Han without any hesitation. Qi La, his sleeve was ripped open, a white mark left on Ling Han's forearm. However, he had already learned the body of dead tree ability, so while the wild girl's claws were sharp, they only managed to leave behind a few white marks on his arm. Who? The wild girl bared her white teeth at Ling Han, as if she was a fierce beast caught in a trap, looking very irritable. Ling Han looked slightly surprised, because he was in the element gathering tier and possessed extremely powerful strength. Yet if he had not gripped tightly enough and held on, this wild little girl may have successfully struggled free from his grasp. But this wild little girl was only 5 or 6 years old, so she definitely should not have awakened her spirit base yet. How then was it possible that she possessed such powerful strength? Out of curiosity, Ling Han used his consciousness to scan over her, and discovered there was actually origin power in the blood and flesh of the little girl. Unexpectedly, she really was a martial artist, and was in about the 3rd layer of body refining tier. How was this possible? After a martial artist had awakened their spirit base, he could, with a cultivation technique, begin cultivation, absorbing spiritual qi and transforming it into origin power to refine his own blood, flesh, and bones. This was the body refining tier. Each martial artist cultivated with a cultivation technique, so naturally there would be signs of the circulation paths of his origin power left behind on the martial artist's body in accordance with the cultivation technique he was practicing. That was why a martial artist with a higher cultivation level was able to identify his opponent's cultivation level based on his circulation paths. That was also why no one had discovered that this wild little girl had the ability of the 3rd layer of body refining tier, because there was no sign that she had cultivated before. Ling Han was different. He still possessed a sliver of the consciousness of heaven tier, and so managed to see through to the girl's essence. Could this little girl actually have a special constitution? But he had only heard of special constitutions being able to improve the owner's battle prowess, and had never heard that there was a special constitution that would aid the owner's cultivation. But if this little girl was not the descendant of those powerful races, then why had the fierce tiger adopted her? Moreover, she managed to form her own origin power without practicing any kind of cultivation technique. This was illogical no matter what, and the only explanation was that she had some kind of special constitution. True, there were so many different kinds of special constitutions in this world, how could he manage to comprehend all of them? Ling Han's expression remained unchanged. He turned and said to Qi Yongyi, "I'll bring this little girl back first and give her a good cleaning." You're not going to watch the upcoming battle?" Qi Yongyi asked strangely. The battle of a martial artist in Gushing Spring Tier did not come around every day, and to those at the peak of Element Gathering Tier, watching this kind of battle would somewhat help them in their attempt to break through to Gushing Spring Tier. No, Ling Han shook his head. For him, comprehension of the different tiers was something that he had absolutely no need of. He brought the wild little girl back to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. The girl was extremely violent. She kept trying to find chances to bite him or scratch him, so Ling Han did not dare to be too careless. After all, the little girl's teeth were really powerful. If bitten, even he would feel a little pain. One has to know that he has already learned the Body of Dead Tree ability. Any ordinary attack not only would not be able to injure him, he wouldn't feel any bit of pain from it. He had possibly picked up a valuable treasure. Ling Han brought the little girl back to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Lu Yutong had not gone with him as she had been making the final bit of accumulation, preparing to break through to Gushing Spring Tier. She had just walked out and seeing the dirty little child hanging from his hand, she could not help but be surprised. "It's good that you're here. Give this little girl a bath while I go out and buy her some clothing," Ling Han threw the wild little girl to her. "But you have to be careful, this little girl is quite strong, and has very sharp teeth. If you're bitten, you'll definitely bleed." Lu Yutong's face was filled with shock. She was in the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier and long past Body Refining Tier, so all the muscles in her body have been refined and became extremely tough. Only sharp weapons should be able to injure her, but now a little girl's bite could actually cause her to bleed too. But Ling Han was definitely not the type to speak nonsense, so she still very carefully took hold of the wild little girl. Ling Han went out and bought some children's clothing. By the time he returned, the wild little girl had completely changed. She was now like a lotus flower emerging from clear water, definitely a beauty in the bud. But the little girl was currently completely wrapped up in bedsheets, tied with a rope. This was not something that the strength of the 3rd layer of Body Refining Tier could break out of, so she looked very funny. Though the little girl's appearance has completely changed and was given a gorgeous transformation, there was absolutely no decrease in her ferocity. She had still her small mouth open, growling in a low voice at Lu Yutong. Chapter 79, A Slip of the Tongue After Drinking. You really weren't kidding, this little girl's teeth are really powerful. Lu Yutong raised her left arm. Bandages were wrapped around her palm and elbow. Obviously, she had been bitten. Previously, even Ling Han had been bitten when he let his guard down, proving that this little girl was really very good at sneak attacks. More importantly, you simply wouldn't believe how fierce her teeth were unless you experienced it with your own body. This girl was definitely born in the year of the dog. Ling Han shook his head. She's much more powerful than a dog, she's definitely born in the year of the tiger. Lu Yutong had already experienced some hardship, and shook her head with lingering fear. The first time she was bitten was indeed due to her carelessness, but she had still been bitten a second time even though she had had her guard up, proving how scary this wild little girl was. Of course, this was also because she had not thought of harming the wild girl. Otherwise, no matter how sharp her teeth was, Lu Yutong would have easily killed her with one swat. Where did she come from? Lu Yutong asked curiously. She had been living in the wild, raised by a tiger. I don't know anything else besides that. Ling Han bent down in front of the wild little girl, his hand extended to tease her. Little girl, you probably don't have a name, so I'll have to give you one. Who? Who? The wild little girl kept opening and closing her mouth, her teeth clicking noisily together, as she chased after Ling Han's finger for a bite. You were raised by a tiger, so we'll call you Hunyo then. Ling Han said with a smile, then turned to Lu Yutong and asked, is there something like a birthmark on her? With that, we'll be able to help her find her real parents in the future. There is one. Lu Yutong nodded. There was a very strange mark on her ankle, though I can't tell if she was born with it or someone had marked her after her birth. Ling Han lifted the covers to take a look, and there was indeed a mark on the little girl's left ankle. It was about the size of a copper coin, with a very complicated pattern. He really could not tell what the pattern meant. Theoretically, such a complicated marking should have been branded after her birth, but there was absolutely no sign of any such branding, so it looked as if she had been born with it. It was really very odd. What do you plan for Hunyo? Lu Yutong asked. She had already started feeling affection for this little girl. This little girl only thinks that she is a wild beast. If you don't plan well enough, she will definitely get into trouble. Ling Han nodded and said, let's have her follow us first. Wait until she regains her human intelligence before we decide the next step. Hunyo did not think that she was a human being at all. She was like a wild cat or a tiger cub. They helped her put on some clothing, but she immediately ripped the clothes off her. If they did not tie her up, she would definitely be even more nimble than a monkey. What was even more of a headache for Ling Han was the fact that she did not eat cooked meat. Whether it was grilled or boiled meat, she would not touch a single bite of it if it was put in front of her. Instead, her eyes would fix upon Ling Han's neck, killing intent brimming within her eyes. Obviously, she would be happier to have Ling Han as her feast. To remove her wild nature, the first step was to change her eating habits. Ling Han took a bite of the grilled meat in front of the little girl, then put the grilled meat back down in front of her, then stepped back. Hunyo kept holding herself back from making any moves, but after half a day, her stomach grumbled, and her eyes had become even fiercer. Still, she did not make a move to eat the meat until it was about midnight, and she finally could bear it no longer. She squirmed a bit, and finally took and began to eat the grilled meat. Both her hands and feet were tied, so she could only wriggle forward like a worm. Her appetite was terrifyingly large. She quickly finished off such a huge pork leg. The little girl licked her lips as if she had not eaten enough. The expression on her face was very strange, because she had never eaten such delicious meat. On the second day, Ling Han continued to attend various social gatherings, and on the fourth day, Li Hao and his other old friends finally found the opportunity to meet him. I never thought that you would actually manage to get the first place. Yeah, you are really impressive, too amazing. I am more envious of Li Hao. He's going to enter into Huyang Academy very soon and Big Brother Ling will take care of him there, so there's no fear that he's going to be bullied in an unfamiliar place. Lu Dong and the others talked in succession as they continued to fill his cup with wine, rejecting his own attempts to reciprocate the gesture. Due to their inferior status, they could only wait until the majority of the others had dispersed before they dared to come meet with Ling Han. Today, they naturally came with the intent to get Ling Han drunk. However, when they had about reached half a round of drinks, Chen Pengju revealed a face filled with hesitation. After a long while, he finally spoke. I may have caused a huge disaster. What's the matter? Everyone else asked. Chen Pengju clenched his teeth and said, when we returned from the Balance Mountains, I shared a drink with one of my clansmen. I drank a bit too much, and it seems like I accidentally spoke about the incident with Hang Zhan. What? Li Hao and the other four immediately stood, their faces instantly paling. Hang Zhan was the grandson of the seventh elder of Stone Wolf Gate, and recently, people from the Stone Wolf Gate have all been searching for his killer. If the information was leaked out, then that seventh elder from Stone Wolf Gate would definitely come running. A powerful warrior of gushing spring tear. Ling Han did not take it to heart too much. He too had the assistance of warriors of gushing spring tear, and the Stone Wolf Gate should know that there stood 3 black great alchemists behind him, so they definitely would not dare to be rash. Perhaps only that seventh elder may possibly go on a mad rampage. After all, his flesh and blood grandson had died, so it depended on his temper. If he was the fiery, short-tempered type, then it was indeed possible that he would make a murderous charge towards Ling Han. So did you say something or not? Lu Dong asked anxiously. Gorak town fell within the area under the jurisdiction of the Stone Wolf Gate, and the seventh elder had just cause on his side, vengeance for his grandson, so even if he massacred their clans, the most the De Yuan king would do was to verbally reprimand him. After all, this was a world where the strongest was respected. I really can't remember, I really drank too much that day. Chen Pengju said, scowling miserably. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, if that person from the Stone Wolf Gate really went charging to your clans, then just be honest and tell him to come look for me. No, big brother Ling, we will definitely not betray you. That's right, how could we be so disloyal? Lu Dong and the others all shook their heads in refusal. But were their words true, and how many of them were actually speaking truthfully, that was another matter entirely. Ling Han smiled, and said, there's no harm, this is the truth anyways. Moreover, I have the ability to protect myself, so I do not fear that seventh elder. But for you guys, I can't guarantee your safety, so listen to me and tell the truth. Seeing Ling Han insist so strongly, Lu Dong and the rest could only nod their heads in agreement while hoping Chen Pengju's tongue had not slipped after drinking. If that was the case, then all would be well. With such a heavy worry weighing down on their hearts, the atmosphere obviously became very stifling, so very soon, the gathering concluded and everyone returned to their own respective homes. When Ling Han returned to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, he saw Lu Yutong was teaching Hu Niu how to speak. However, the wild girl was still very violent. She did not pay any attention to Lu Yutong's attempts and only kept baring her teeth and snarling, looking very much like a little tiger. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, you have to take advantage of her weakness, doesn't the little girl like to eat? So you can just use food as a reward. If she performs well, give it to her, making her slowly learn to obey you. Lu Yutong rolled her eyes at him, and said in annoyance, you really think it's like raising a kitten or a puppy? This girl is much fiercer than any kitten or puppy. Ling Han said with a click of his tongue. He stretched out a hand to touch Hu Niu's head, and the girl immediately tried to bite him, but thankfully, he managed to pull his hand back in time. Ko, a series of knocks was heard from the door. Ling Han and Lu Yutong both turned around to see an alchemist's apprentice standing at the doorway, who said, young Master Ling, there arrived someone who claims he is from the Ling clan of Grey Cloud Town outside. He says he has some urgent matter and wishes to meet you. Oh. Ling Han walked out. What could it be? His father had just returned, so logically, there shouldn't be any big issues, right? Could it be the seventh elder of Stone Wolf Gate? Alarm rose in his heart, and he immediately quickened his walk into a run. Seeing this, Lu Yutong left Hu Niu behind and quickly followed after. Chapter 80, Comeback of the Qing Clan. Time slowly turned back to a few days ago. Grey Cloud Town, Qing Clan residence. An extremely powerful aura suddenly spread out from the deepest parts of the Qing Clan residence. It was a very terrifying aura, so much that an intense feeling of fear rose within the heart of even an elite in the 9th layer of element gathering tier like Cheng Wenkuan. Yet Cheng Wenkuan did not feel anxious at all. Instead, an overjoyed expression appeared on his face and he actually started to wave his hands and dance around. Third uncle has broken through. Ha ha ha, third uncle has broken through. Ling clan, you people were so arrogant before, but you would never have thought that my third uncle has been in seclusion all this while. breaking through to gushing spring tear. His expression turned grim all of a sudden, and he declared, "From now onwards, there will be no more Ling clan in Grey Cloud Town." Ha 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 ha. A bout of loud laughter was heard, and a thin old man was taking big strides into the main hall. Waves of terrifying power continuously spread out from his body as he approached. This was because he had just broken through, and so had not yet managed to completely control his own power. He was Cheng Wen-kuan's third uncle, Cheng Jiyu, a martial arts maniac. He was already acclaimed as the top elite martial artist of the whole Qing clan years ago, yet did not have much interest in having power over the clan. Instead, he had kept himself in seclusion to break through to gushing spring tear. Even in their own Qing clan, many clansmen had all thought that he had long since died. And his hard work had paid off, for he had successfully broken through to gushing spring tear. This was the strongest level of existence in the whole of Grey Cloud Town, more than enough to sweep away all opponents with his overwhelming might. Greetings, third uncle. Congratulations, third uncle. Cheng Wen-kuan half knelt on the ground, his face filled with overwhelming joy. Rise. Cheng Jiyu raised his hand. His eyes turned away from Cheng Wen-kuan, and he said, "Call Xiao Yuan and the others back. I have not seen them for quite a few years." "Third uncle, Xiao Yuan, he's dead," Cheng Wen-kuan said, choking with grief. "What?" Cheng Jiyu suddenly slammed a hand onto the table. Peng, this table made of excellent sandalwood instantly turned into broken pieces. His furious eyes widened, and he said, "Who has killed my grandson?" Cheng Xiao Yuan was Cheng Jiyu's direct grandson. He had also inherited the latter's talent, and as a result, was taken in as a disciple by the Stone Wolf sect. Not even Cheng Hao or Cheng Xiang had this kind of talent, that little bastard from the Ling clan, Ling Han. Cheng Wen-kuan immediately said, "Pa." Cheng Jiyu's hand rose and fell quickly, giving Cheng Wen-kuan a slap. He sneered, "Then what are you doing, still sitting here? Why did you not come see me with the head of that little bastard?" Cheng Wen-kuan did not dare to have any feelings of anger. In front of a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear, he wouldn't be able to raise even a single finger. He quickly knelt and said, "How could I not want to avenge Xiao Yuan? It's just that there is an elder from Stone Wolf sect supporting him, I can't touch him." "An elder from Stone Wolf sect?" Cheng Jiyu's eyes narrowed slightly. All the elders of Stone Wolf sect were in gushing spring tear while he himself had just broken through to this tier. Whoever that elder was, it was impossible he would be able to match him in a battle. But very quickly, he gave a humph and said, "At most, that little bastard must have curried a bit of favor with that elder. Even if I killed him, that elder would never think of declaring a blood feud with me. Let's go. Come with me and we will immediately charge towards the Ling clan residence. Since he dared to kill my grandson, then I will slaughter every clansman of the Ling clan in exchange." Cheng Wen-kuan was of course overjoyed. He had been afraid that Cheng Jiyu would fall back, but thanks to the death of Cheng Xiao Yuan, Cheng Jiyu was overwhelmed with rage, so much that he had no fear for even an elder of Stone Wolf sect. Practically the whole Qing clan moved out, all of them bursting with killing intent as they made their way to the Ling clan residence. Moving so pompously through the streets of course attracted the attention of the smaller clans in the town, as they all came out to observe the spectacle. What's the matter with the Qing clan? Could they be about to start a war with one of the clans? Aside from the Ling clan, what other clan is worthy of such a big movement from the Qing clan? That can't be true, can it? The power of the Ling clan is practically equal to the power of the Qing clan, and if a war sparks up between these two great clans, both sides would only suffer. The Qing clan couldn't be so foolish, right? No. Don't you guys know that the Qing clan is not having a good time lately? I heard that their main source of income has received an all-out suppression from the Ling clan, and now, they can't even afford to pay the salaries of their servants. Yes. I heard about that too. Lately, many of the servants and guards of Qing clan have all secretly ran off. Are they in such a terrible condition? Then no wonder the Qing clan is going all out now. Otherwise, they'd be wiped out by the Ling clan in the future. At least, if they made a gamble now, there could be a chance of victory for them. Qing Wenkun heard the discussions from around him, and could not stop a cold smile from appearing on his face. Going all out? How could that be? They now had a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear fighting on their side, and they were going to wipe out the Ling clan. Going all out? Only the Ling clan needed to do that, but it would all be pointless effort. One finger of a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear would be enough to suppress all resistance. The Qing clan advanced like a great flood while the townspeople followed behind them to watch the ensuing show. This was a great battle between the two great clans. If any one of them missed it, they'd definitely regret it for life. Very quickly, they set out from the town's east side and arrived at the west side, which was where the Ling clan residence was located. With such a big commotion, it of course caused a disturbance within the Ling clan. Ling Dongxing had just returned, and he immediately stepped out, with his clansmen behind him. Ling clan head, long time no see, Qing Wenkun raised a hand, and all the clansmen of the Qing clan halted their steps. He smiled at Ling Dongxing, his face filled with smugness because very soon, this old rival of his would be kneeling down in submission in front of him. Ling Dongxing frowned. They had obviously come with bad intentions. He raised his voice and said, "Brother Cheng has brought so many people here. Are you here to make a demonstration?" Ha 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 ha. Qing Wenkun laughed loudly, before suddenly stopping. He said in a deep voice, "That's right, I'm here today to make a demonstration. Ling Dongxing, immediately order the members of your clan to surrender, and I can consider killing a few people less." Qing Wenkun, have you gone mad? Ling Dongxing asked coldly. This was a humongous joke. You think I'm joking with you? Qing Wenkun laughed coldly. Are you not? Ling Dongxing asked back. Of course not. A cold voice declared. An old man with a tall, thin figure left the ranks of the Qing clan and passed Qing Wenkun by, his face filled with killing intent. Who's this old man? Those who had gathered around to watch the spectacle were all curious about the identity of this mysterious old man. Was there such a person in the Qing clan? It looks like his status is not beneath Qing Wenkun's. I've got it, he's Qing Jiyu. An old man suddenly gasped in surprise. Everyone said that he has long died. I never thought he's actually still alive. Ling Dongxing of course recognized Qing Jiyu, though the latter now looked much older than he had last seen him. He raised his clasped hands in Qing Jiyu's direction as a sign of respect to someone from the generation before his. But the issue now concerned the pride of the two clans, so naturally, he would not give in easily. He said, if the Qing clan insists on battle, there is no member of the Ling clan that is afraid of death. You think you're worthy of standing as an equal with my Qing clan? Qing Jiyu stretched out a hand, and pressed down on Ling Dongxing. I'll put you down first. You've gone too far. Ling Dongxing raised his palms in a counterattack. He had been praised as the top genius in the whole of Grey Cloud Town in the past, and so of course possessed exceptional power. As his palms moved, more than 10 images of palm strikes could be seen, and the attacks were extremely fast. How could a firefly be worthy of competing with the moon over which is brighter? Qing Jiyu's finger extended, and there actually appeared a gigantic palm about the size of a millstone which pressed down on Ling Dongxing. Origin power given form, gushing spring tear. Ling Dongxing gasped in shock, his face immediately turning pale. He finally understood where the Qing clan got such confidence from. Qing Jiyu had actually broken through to gushing spring tear. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.